Joining him on my left is Senator Dennis Mendiola. To my far right, Senator Carl King Neighbors, and the Vice Chair, Senator Karina McGoffin. I believe Senator Bavalta is joining us online. With 6 members present, including myself as Chair, Donna Manglonia, we have the quorum to proceed with today's agenda. I'd also like to introduce staff assisting the committee. We have our legal counsel, Joe Bermudez, our fiscal analyst, Dave Devapon, our Sergeant at Arms, Ben Terlahi, IT Del Camacho, as well as LJ Castro, and our LA Jolin Duenas Tagawa. All right, with that, members, can I get a motion for the adoption of today's agenda?
So move.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We now move down to public comments. The floor is open for any member of the public who wishes to make any comments today. Looks like there's none. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, introduction. Good morning again, everyone. Today we have the Department of Finance joining us today. We also extended the invitation to OMB to assist in any questions we have in regards to the budget proposal. The Department of Finance submitted a budget request asking for $14,600,000 to include 295 FTEs. They've also requested, or of that, 10.9 are allocated or are requested for personnel, 3.3 for operations, and then 300,000 for utilities. However, in the budget submission, the administration has allocated 6.4 million to cover 256 FTEs. Additionally, with the revised budget, 5.3 was taken away from the total executive branch personnel to meet the 25% that is owed to PSS, but there hasn't been any adjustment in regards to the hours, but I understand that that will be covered by another source of income, and so if that can be stated on the record. The Department of Finance, I believe we have several divisions under the Secretary's office. We have the Finance and Accounting. We have 6 positions that were taken off or not provided based on their requests. We have Treasury. They were given 2 additional FTEs. Rev and Tax. They took out 12 positions. Procurement and Supply, they removed 8 positions. Customs, they removed 6 positions. OIT, they removed 6 positions based on the request. Passport removed 1. And so at this time, I would like to invite the Secretary as well as the team that will be joining her this morning to answer any questions in regards to the requests, as well as questions on our finances in general. At this time, I invite all members of her team. We have additional seats next to Senator Carl. He does invite. Miss Brittany, we have a table over here. If you'd like to sit by a table next to Senator Carl. It seems like everyone wants to squeeze in over there. All right. Good morning again. At this time, I recognize the secretary to provide any remarks if she has anything prepared.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning to the honorable members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity for the Department of Finance to sit before you and answer any questions regarding our budget. I'd like to state for the record that we do support the governor's submission. We understand the current circumstances for the CNMI. We understand that these are challenging times and that we do have our needs that we showed in our request. However, again, we must support the governor's submission based on the current circumstances. The budget presentation that we have for you today focuses on the critical work being done by the Department of Finance and the ongoing projects. We have each division represented here to answer any questions, hoping that the slides will provide talking points on ongoing projects of importance. So thank you again for your time today.
Will you be introducing your team later? Or would you like to take this time?
They'll introduce themselves as their slides come up.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see if this one is. Okay, so the first slide is for the Secretary of Finance office. I have with me our key financial technical analyst, Mr. Ryan Camacho, to share a little bit about the ongoing projects at our office.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Camacho. I am the Senior Financial Analyst at the Secretary of Finance office. There's a team of us working on key projects. And yes, you can see up there, there's 5 that we like to point out today, and I'll talk briefly about them. First is the Munis implementation. We went live with the operation in fiscal year 2022, but it was a rushed situation. And so there's still ongoing efforts to make sure that we can fully maximize the system and build efficient processes to provide timely reports to you, to this body, and to all other stakeholders. And then I'll just go online here. Next one is the single audit. As you're well aware, we are required by our federal federal agencies, federal grantors, to provide single audits on an annual basis. And that's a huge task that we take on yearly. I'd just like to report out that, okay, and I'll touch more about that later. We also do fund certifications. The challenge right now is ongoing with the implementation process. A lot of the accounts were either not transferred over or commingled. So our job right now is to really analyze and reconcile the true fund status that was done through the migration. We have the federal reconciliation of the federal accounts, mainly the ARPA, CARES, and the Community Disaster Loan from FEMA. These require ongoing reports, and they are still open grants with the U.S. Treasury and FEMA. So we still require status updates regarding these funding sources. We also do financial reporting of the revenues and expenditures. I believe it's monthly. We keep track of the revenues, as well as provide expenditure reports and reviews on a monthly or quarterly or as needed basis. Okay. All right. Quick status update on the 21 single audit. We are behind. And so we have to play catch up. The 2023 was due in June. So you see we're 2 years behind. So we're working with our auditors to try to speed up our efforts in order to be compliant with federal regulations. You can see some notes over there, and I'll just make sure that for time's sake, we do expect to publish the single audit for 2021 on August 9. Part of the reason for this delay, when our original was June 30th, is to address the question cost that the auditors initially identified. It was about $330 million of question costs, but the agencies and everyone involved was able to work with them to bring it down to about $53 million in question costs. So you can see the challenges already that we've had during this implementation. And part of the reason is it's so long ago that sometimes the key people that were there at the time are no longer with us, or at the agencies themselves. So in any case, we're doing our best to put it out and get the CNMI on track and in good standing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Next, we have the MPLT line of credit that the Department of Finance is responsible for facilitating with the agencies that have these funds. And so I have a list there of the participating projects, which include the DOF Economic Resiliency Center. And so the terms of the line of credit include $15 million that is available with a 30-day maximum revolving period with an annual interest of 5.5%. We did have our first initial drawdown, and this was for the Garapan Revitalization Project. And I know that the Office of Planning and Development is also coordinating with the other projects that have pending invoices that are ready for payment. And when those are reviewed and approved by OPD, that will be forwarded to finance again to draw down from the line of credit. Okay, I'll move on to the group health and life insurance program that is also assisted by the Secretary of Finance office. And I have Ms. Velma Beneventi here.
Good morning, everyone. So with we will be talking about health insurance stats, our current Aetna contract, the status of the contract, the RFP that we currently have out with regards to health insurance, and some life insurance statistics. So on the first slide, this is the current participants in the GHLI, and it shows you who the participants are and what their percentage of participation is in the health insurance plan. So the CNMI government at 30%, NMISF, which is the retirees, at 25%, and then the rest of the contributing agencies. On the next slide is an executive summary that we receive quarterly from Aetna, and this shows us just at a high level the number of employees that we have, their age, their membership. So as of May 30th, 2024, we were total number of employees of 3,987, and that includes all agencies. Total number of members of 7,795. On our next slide, it shows us how much they've currently paid in medical and pharmacy payments, broken down. And this is year over year. So it's from June 2023 to May 31st, 2024. And this is information that was provided as part of our RFP as well to those who are looking to give us a proposal. Our RFP was supposed to close on July 29th for the health insurance. However, we received an extension request, and so it's not going to close till August 9th. We do have a committee member or several committee members from the Settlement Fund, PSS, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Finance, and the Governor's Office who will be going through these proposals in order to select a new health insurance carrier beginning January 1st, 2025. And then on the next slide is our life insurance statistics. And this shows us the number of subscribers per agency. So there's 4,494 subscribers. And the largest population is NMISF, which are the retirees at 1,559. And then the CNMI government at 1,073. And then the rest of the agencies as well. On the next slide, it shows us how much per pay period is paid for, and this is employee and employer portion for the life insurance. And then it's all broken up by pay period and by fiscal year. So, and the CNMI is responsible for paying the retirees portion of their health and life insurance for the so for life insurance per fiscal year is about $1.1 million.
Thank you so much, Velma. We'll move on to the Division of Financial Services, which is headed by Director Bernie Palacios.
Good morning, everyone. On our slide, I'll just go over the function of what we're doing at the Department of Finance. First, I'm going to start with payroll. We handle about more than 3,000 employees and I have only 3 employees working for payroll. For travel, we have probably more than 600 travelers with only 2 employees. Accounts payable, we handle all the payments for purchase orders, contracts, and we only have 5 individuals. For operation, we certify funds for contracts, POs, requisitions, TAs, and we only have 2 persons. For federal grants, we have about 1,000 projects with only 6 employees. For bank recon, we reconcile bank accounts with only 3 employees. So, and that's what we do in the Department of Finance, Financial Services.
Thank you, Director Bernie. Let me go next. Customs and Biosecurity, I have Mr. Jesse Atalig, Acting Director for Director Mofnes here with us today.
Good morning, Chairman and this body. My name is Jesse A. Atalig. I am with the Division of Customs and Biosecurity, currently assigned to the airport operation and K9. As the secretary had mentioned, director is currently off island. Maybe I can just cover up on just some highlights that customs had been facing in probably the last year or so. We've seen an influx of methamphetamine that had been seized at the border, as everybody can testify to that because it's out on the paper, press conference, and things like that. I know that it is a challenge every day for us as we try to mitigate our current operation and try to move forward and make it more effective and more border control, and basically trying to just intercept all this illicit drugs that's coming into our borders. I understand that Sinamay or Saipan, it is the main border for all the Saipan and Tinian and the other islands. So we do try to communicate with Tinian and Rhoda as far as sharing resources, sharing information with them, vice versa with them. We try to ask them to share information with us in regards to their suspected passengers that might be bringing in illicit drugs into the island of Tinian and Rhoda. Currently, we had launched the EDFs, the electronic customs forms, that is available under travel.mp. I know it is a new project. It's still ongoing. There's so many moving parts behind the system. We've received complaints about how passengers have been processed a little slower than in the past. We are trying to tie up the loopholes on that, as far as putting up a new internet system that would assist the passengers on their cellular device to fill out the customs form, or the kiosk, or even a customs officers just assisting a passenger coming in. I know that the news last night was mentioned that we do not accept 1350 hard copy customs declaration. We do accept them, for the record. We do accept them. If there's a glitch on the system or the internet, we're going to need the hard copy to process the passengers through. We assist disabilities if they need to. We need to assist them with the hard copy. But also, we're trying to encourage passengers to fill out the QR system, just so we can move away from all the hard copy that we've been using for the last 30 years. With that, I yield, and I'm ready to answer any questions. I know Senator Hofstadter came in yesterday and was standing there for 7 minutes, as was mentioned. That's it. Yes.
Thank you, Colonel Atalik. Now we'll move on to revenue and taxation. We have Acting Director Pauline Capileo, who is standing in for our Director Daniel Alvarez.
Good morning. On behalf of Director Daniel Alvarez, I present to you this morning what we have currently that is happening in our office. As you all know, that sometimes in May we kind of open up with an advertisement to the public. It was a press release about the Baltimore University of Baltimore. It's a tax clinic where we entice people that are in delinquents with revenue and taxation in terms of collection, and we were trying to collect. So we had that opportunity for them to come in on a voluntary basis to avail to the service. And this service is for those that have a tax due or have not come in at all. And it's a matter of collecting revenues, those that were in arrears. So we had a pretty good number on that one. And we were able to seize that, I think, on the second or third week of June. That opportunity came to a close. So we're in the midst of now preparing everything to come up with exactly just how many have come up that availed to the program, how many so far have made the payment. And with that, I do know that there was an installment agreement created of about 113. This is what I presented on my last budget hearing with the House of Representatives. There was also an installment agreement of totaling to 1.14 mil. And we do have delinquent cases of about 226 that were assigned to revenue officers. That one is still pending in review. As a matter of fact, we had about 9 total of employees that were supposedly to have gone and attend an officer training back in Guam. Unfortunately, because of budget shortage, we only was able to send 4 out of 9. And currently those 4 are undergoing the revenue officer training in Guam. They won't be back until early September. I think first week of September. There. Yes. Okay. On the 2024 tax season statistics, so far from May of this year, we were able to refund on the 10/40/2023 of about 5,477, 5,477,079. We were able to disperse child tax credit mounting up to 6,544,404. And then last but not least, we were able to disperse a total of 15,793,316 of the earned income tax credit. We are still ongoing with that one. On the collection task force, and like what I mentioned earlier, of how many installment agreement have been created, how many have agreed to pay, and how many cases that are still pending, which are then assigned. Right now, I think all of you guys know about it, or if not, the the Division of Revenue and Taxation is in the process of transitioning to a new tax system. We're currently on a AS 400, and eventually we will go into the RMIS project. That RMIS project, I think I'm ahead of that. No? Okay. RMIS project, hopefully that we would transition by February 2025. There's so much that needed to be improved. And the goal with the new tax system is really to improve the user experience, to enable submission of the tax information online, scalability to improve efficiency and handle large volume of data, and of course the resources optimization to reduce operational costs, and lastly to enhance the cybersecurity. This is the new system that we're now transitioning slowly. But all of that comes back to our legacy on what you guys just heard me kind of review. We have the current challenges. That's okay. On the current challenges that we are encountering right now is the underreporting of how many taxpayer that underreports their revenue. And there is an overwhelming number of that pending audit. And with that said, we have different government agency that came on board with the present employees of revenue and taxation because we're pretty understaffed. And in order for us to carry out this mission, we need to have the enforcement coming on. And I know that before these enforcement came in, we had our employees, and they were doing a superb job in doing, going out, enforcing the laws, checking on whether the people that are individual or company are in compliance with their tax obligation. But because we needed to bring in the revenue to revenue, we had the other government agency supporting us and by giving us some of their employees. So with that said, at the moment we have I know that we have 7 from different government agency aside from our own people. Under the enforcement, we only have a total of 4 people. 2 of them were sent down to collection to help on the task force, while the other 2 remain in the enforcement, and that's where the other government agency stepped in. And they are helping us to go out and enforce the law and bring in all what is needed. We have the e-gaming people. And again, the e-gaming, these are the poker establishment. And with that, they go out and check on the meters and they check on the BGRs or what has been filed. All of these, they come back to work and then they do the work after, after they do the report, they submit in and letting us know what's going on. There's just so much going on. And believe me, with the shortage of understaff and even with the government agency, other government agency helping us, we do need help. Not just on budget, but also employees. Because there's so much going on here in the CNMI. And in order for us to bring this about and meet with the current challenges, things have to be done in a way. And we know that we support the governor's budget for fiscal year 25. But I'm just seeking you guys, as the Senate chamber, to help us, because we have a big mission, and it's a mission not just for the Department of Finance, but it's a mission for all of us here in the CNMI, from Saipan, Tinian, and Rhoda. Sorry, I'm shaking because believe me, not only that I'm cold, but I'm nervous facing you guys. Oh, it's not. But really, we need to hire people. Hire so that we can enforce the needs to meet the challenges. We have the education background of people that are working there. We have their trainings. And in order for all of these to happen, we need the personal budget to increase at least by 20% or something. Help us. Help us to go out there and help you, the government, to bring in what we need. Thank you, Pen. Really, because what do you call it? It's like what I'm saying, and I don't want to keep repeating and I don't want to keep going around. It's just that we have been repeatedly, redundantly saying the same thing. We're so understaffed, we're underpaid, and everybody's doing their best to try to reach out. But to meet all of these, we need to handle the large volume of the data. We need the tools. And I'm just seeking the help of the Senate chamber to please look at it. Because to have effective tax enforcement, we have to ensure the accurate reporting to reduce the tax evasion, to reduce revenue loss, and to increase the overall revenue. Okay, so I don't know. I sit in front of you. I'm smiling, but believe me, I'm shaking already because this is my first time.
Sorry.
Oh my God. All I know is we need help. And it's not just the nodding and everything. Do something about it because honestly, we have our secretary helping us, but we need you and the House to give us what we need in order to bring this revenue into the CNMI so that we can bring up the economy. Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, before we can recognize Senator Neighbors.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions following up. I apologize if I'm interrupting the slides. I just kind of wanted to keep track of the rhythm of the conversation and the dialogue. I understand that you guys are obviously seeking assistance for more staffing. It's very clear that a lot of you guys have been spread thin, not through your own doing, but just through the process of trying to kind of unravel and decipher what's all going on in all of the different divisions. You did mention that you had sought the assistance from other government agencies with regards to some of the underreporting. What government agencies did you seek assistance from?
Oh, okay.
If I may answer that,
No,
that's
by all
from
means.
the task force, it's
Okay.
tax collection task force. So we had some assistance from the Office of Zoning, Department of Commerce, Department of Labor. Those were our top three. And then we had some assistance as well from the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. These are temporary details to rev and tax. We had 2 rounds. And so the first round, we had about 10 to 12. And now the second round of assistance, 7 came over.
Okay. And lastly, do you guys have a rough estimate of the amount of underreporting that is taking place that you guys can kind of provide the body? Yeah.
Yes.
Any numbers you can provide the committee?
Okay, on the underreporting, I can't come up with the exact numbers
problem.
at the moment, but I know that based on the collection of the delinquent accounts, we were able to mount up to about 14.46 mil.
Mhm.
We were able to come up from the time that they started out last year to present.
Those are
Yeah.
collections of
But
actual
those are the
tax
collected.
obligations.
Correct. Correct.
As for underreporting, it's usually determined when there's either an audit
Mhm.
that's done, or if the taxpayer came forth,
Mhm.
like during the clinic, or just voluntarily coming in,
Mhm.
or if there was a tip that was provided either to enforcement or auditors that make a site visit, then there's estimates, but the final underreporting number would be caught by our exams branch, thus the
Sure.
audit branch.
So it's
Yeah.
a moving target. It's a moving number.
Yeah, it's a moving
It's
target.
cumulative.
I know that like one figure that I can share was when we focused on enforcement with the food stamp program, and we worked with their enforcement section. And then in that audit initiative, the auditors uncovered 24 million of underreported revenue. So the taxes that were calculated based on that number for multiple retailers. So it's only in those situations where we conduct the audit, then we can determine, but that was only for that pool
Sure.
of taxpayers that were audited. It's not the entire tax base.
That's just one.
Yeah.
That's just one
Yeah, it's
particular
just- yeah.
section.
Mhm.
Understood. Thank you. Are you, Chair?
Senator Mendiola.
Just wanted to follow up on that. So this underreporting, is it based on you guys' observation or through the task force? Is it purposely done, or is it? I mean, is it something that we can address, or trying to come down stricter on some regulation? Just curious because.
I think part of the issue is tax education. Taxpayers choose who to prepare their taxes, and sometimes they don't go with a certified public accountant. They go to their neighbor, or they go to a tax preparer who's not necessarily certified to prepare the type of complex taxes if you were a business. So that's one issue. I'm not saying that there's no case or instance of intentional tax evasion. It exists. And so it's on a case by case
Case by
basis.
case. Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that. And it sounds like you guys are really coming down on a lot of these tax issues, and I think it's important for us to recognize that so that we can address it in the future. Because maybe some people don't. I mean, I don't understand the tax system, so I do go through certified tax people, right? So if the issue is through those certified tax people, then that's something that we can address in terms of policies or regulations. So, anyways, thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Finance team. Just a follow-up question on the tax collection. So I know that earlier you said that some of these uncovered underreporting taxes is because of the audit, right? And that's from the taxpayer standpoint or from that side. What is revenue and taxes maybe a standard operating procedure on your end that tracks or monitors these tax reporting? So, for instance, right, at customs, they receive the excise tax, correct? And based on that, we know the number of containers that are coming in, the type of goods that are in there, and the quantities and all that. So, from that standpoint, what is revenue and tax doing to ensure that the statistics that are coming in from customs, right, regarding general excise tax, is somewhat matching with what is being reported?
I'll take that question,
Okay.
Senator Magofnia. That was one of the major weaknesses of our legacy tax system, and that's something that we are going to address in our new tax development. We are focusing on reporting and tax statistics because the customs system will be integrated with DRT's tax system.
Great.
And those are the exact strategies that we know we would love to have. And that's something that our developer is aware. And I think the design is coming along very nicely, and that we have more flexibility in what we would like to see our tax system do because of the new modern platform that we're using with our RMIS versus our legacy system. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's really great news. I am very hopeful that the finance team and revenue and tax is doing its very best to resolve a lot of these issues that arise, right? And so a huge kudos to you guys. Thank you for all your efforts. Staying on the same topic of collection, you had mentioned earlier that through the audit with NAP, it was identified that 24 million was underreported. So where are we with the collection of the 24 million?
It's on a case by case. I think we focused the audit on the top 20 or 30 NAP coupon redeemers. And so as far as the repayment of that, I know that once they close the audit, they go and they're referred to collection. And that's where they either, some make significant payments, and then others are also able to enter into an installment plan.
Okay.
So yeah, we capture them into the collection process. So most of them for that specific audit are already in part of our AR and part of a payment plan.
Okay. And I know you said that we don't want to jump into conclusion, with whether or not they were evading taxes and stuff like that. But there has to be some consequences when things are not properly done. So what are the consequences of these taxpayers who may not have intentionally, evaded or underreported, but nevertheless they violated, some critical important laws? So yeah.
So of course, the initial consequence of not paying the proper amount of tax is the penalties and interest that accrue since the time when you were supposed to file. So if that filing that was audited goes back 10 years, all of that P&I, we call penalties and interest, will
Mhm.
accrue, and then it becomes significant, even like triple the amount of the original tax
Absolutely,
liability.
yeah.
And so that is the consequence on the taxpayer. As far as criminal consequences, that is also an area that we need help in, is hiring a financial crime investigator. And this is something that we're partnering with OPA and the Office of the Attorney General to try and gather resources to find a financial crime investigator. Because when our auditors uncover findings during their audit, we need someone to refer it to.
Absolutely.
And right now, we don't have a financial investigative arm. We did recently meet with the IRS criminal section that came from Seattle, and we are in current discussions of how they can support DRT in boosting that capacity. But again, we know, like Ms. Polly mentioned, we need the support behind that. But it's ongoing right now.
Okay.
Yeah, they were here last
I-
month.
I support that 100%, and I think it's very critical and essential that revenue and tax have that that position. So, is that included in the budget request? As far as FTE, so you're not sure. It's just that it's so critical and essential in helping the CNMI recoup some of these funds that that are underreported. And so, in order to do that, we need the right person to conduct that work. But if it's not, I highly recommend that we include that in the request for consideration, with the House and the Senate. And if we could, if maybe Revenue and Tax or yourself can provide us with an estimate of what that salary would be, that would be great. But at this time, Chair, I yield. I have more, but we'll continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice. Please proceed, Secretary.
Thank you. I'll move on to the Division of Treasury. We have Ms. Remy Bauta here, standing in for Director Connie Agufto.
Yeah, Mike. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair. I'm sitting in for our Treasurer, Connie Ogutu. Treasury's role is to receive funds or collect money and disperse, and we also do the federal drawdown. Currently, we have a cashier at motor vehicle. And we have two head cashiers, one at motor vehicle and one at Treasury. We have total of 12 employees at Treasury. Oh, and also, yes, I'm sorry, we recently merged with Passport. There's 2 staff under Passport.
I also wanted to add that we receive requests from the municipalities of Tinian and Rhoda. I know that it was it last week? Last week, we did an outreach to Tinian, and they processed nearly 100 applications for Passport. And so in the past, the Passport office was always understaffed, very hard to do those outreach sessions. But since we've combined with the Division of Treasury, we're able to cross-train with other Treasury employees and have them become Passport agents, so that we'd be better able to help the municipalities and also to process more passport applications. So thank you so much, Mt. Red. I'll move on to Division of Procurement Services. I have Director BJ Nicholas here.
Good morning, honorable members. My name is BJ Nicholas. I am the acting director of Procurement Services. As many are aware, procurement is the front door to government spending. We do work with 162 different government agencies, instrumentalities, or offices to spend government funds on various public purposes, whether it be construction projects or being able to avail towards professional services, things of that nature. One of our bigger pieces right now is contracts management. Currently, I only have one individual assigned to contracts, and he is currently responsible for reviewing the over 800 open contracts that the government has with various individuals in our private sector. I do have somebody supporting him currently from our admin section. Unfortunately, the person is carrying multiple roles right now, and it is something that we are trying to work through. And any support we could get to be able to augment any shortages in that regard for personnel would be greatly appreciated. As this body very much knows, our biggest resource is the human resource, and absent that, it is very hard for us to process. In addition to the 800 plus open contracts, I do have two individuals who do purchase orders for the government as well. It's about 700 plus open purchase orders for the government that we are also looking to address. Another area of responsibility that the government has under procurement services is the asset management role, being able to account and assist government entities with the various assets that are under their responsibility, whether it be equipment or other things of personnel stuff that they use for their offices, computers and whatnot. We manage and maintain all of that through procurement. We also support audit findings and whatnot through the different engagements we have with OPA or our auditor, Ernst & Young. We are the repository for a lot of government information, and we do work with various entities, whether it be government or private sector, open government acts and whatnot, to ensure that we properly remit the requested information to individuals that are inquiring how government funds are being spent. Outside of that, any support that we can get would be greatly appreciated. We know it's tough right now given the current fiscal landscape we have, but should we have an account, like I mentioned in the House a few weeks back, maybe we missed one account and there's like a couple of dollars in there that we could support to procurement, anything to that extent, we would love to have the conversation. Thank you, guys.
All right. Last but not least on our set of slides, we move on to the Office of Information Technology. We have Ms. Kina Babauta here standing in for Director and Acting CIO Frank Sellis.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm here on behalf of Office of Information Technology. My name is Kina Babauta. So we'll just go through the slides. Munis maintenance and support. So currently we have two people who we call the SME, subject matter experts, but not necessarily in its fullest capacity. So they're just through training, through research, through support tickets is how we consider them SMEs. So for cybersecurity threats, we have a lot of our applications in place for that. So we have the CATO, which I just touch base on that is
there's the threat events that we had.
Oh, okay. So for the cybersecurity, we did have some threat events. In April, we had 233 million security events, 56 investigated events, and 13 suspicion and malicious stories resolved by CATO. So it's a two-part series. So it is CATO and it is also Sentinel-1, which is our antivirus. It's an enterprise application. So it's not the one that you just purchase off of the store. It's the cost applies to the security that comes with it.
Let me just move to the others to discuss.
So the CISA 5-year plan, I am aware of that, but as far as the details that go into that, I can't really go more on that. But I'm aware that we do have a 5-year plan to implement security from the top level, which would be OIT. Then we would enforce it out and make sure the policies are met. So we want to have a standard policy, so you don't just go and buy a regular stuff that's not really in compliance with either federal, FedRAMP, or anything with CISA related. So it's maintained as all cybersecurity is what the CISA plan is for. And we are partners with Broadband Policy and Development. The BEAD program. So again, I apologize. I'm not really familiar with that. I'm aware of it. I don't have too much details on that.
And then we have just what that looks like for the maintenance and support. Just some details. You talk about moving to the cloud.
So yes, we are planning to move to the cloud, and so it's because one, more importantly, we don't have the resources in terms of personnel, and on-prem, so on-premises equipment costs more than if we just move to the cloud. So the cloud is more of just making sure we're logged in, our security is there, but we don't have to physically update the, $2, $3, $5,000 servers. And for OIT, we have about 12 of those. So it's one of those, if we go cloud, it's a one and done thing. So there's no equipment to upgrade, just applications. So yeah, I already touched base on the Munis will no longer be updated. And then on the Munis support workload, it does say that we get 5 to 10 calls per day, 5 to 10 tickets per day, and 5 to 10 email requests per day. But to be honest, it's a little bit more than that, but that would be a standard practice if it's on austerity. But on a busy day where everybody has budget reports, everybody has requisitions, or their federal grant is expected to end this tomorrow. So it depends on a day-to-day basis, fluctuation of calls and tickets. But it's come in very helpful. We do password resets, we do DOAs, which we enforce through Munis. We do workflow troubleshooting, which is again back to Munis. And then we have Munis glitches and backend servers. And that is where you guys have experience where, oh, secretary, we can't seem to access this. It's not popping up. Those are the glitches that we encounter due to we have to do backup. Sometimes we have to do it at 9 a.m. So, we do apologize for that inconvenience, but it's just on a day-to-day basis, on a glitch-to-glitch basis as well. So we do creation of new users and removing of users. So it's very important that we make sure the flow is done properly, because if your role was not the same as the person exiting, it takes a little bit more time, or if it's the same role, then it's easier.
Let me see if there's any others to touch on.
The Microsoft.
You can talk about it.
Yeah. So I would really like to bring up the Microsoft 365. It's an enterprise, it's a government level application. It's called Microsoft 365 G3 series. It's a state level. So that is us starting with our cloud for our email servers. We do have on-prem, but majority of it is done through the cloud. So the reason why we would like to enforce that and ask for assistance on that is because it really does help us with the layer of security that comes with it. So yes, we do experience phishing emails. Yes, we do experience all of that. But as long as we have the M365, the Sentinel-1, and the Cato, all three of those play their part. And then we in turn are a little bit safer on the cyber side. So the level of security that comes with M365 is, one of those things is you never have to pay for Microsoft Office ever again. So it's a reusable license. You don't ever have to worry about losing your files as long as you follow what we would like to enforce, which is the OneDrive. Just everything goes back on the cloud, right? We would like to avoid flash drives transferring of files by using shared drive. We would like to avoid people's sharing information, because we audit those things upon request. We also like to make sure that we don't have to pay for subscriptions for virtual meetings, because it's unlimited. So we have Teams for virtual, we have the email, we have the shared drive, the OneDrive. So it's an all-in-one, but it comes with the government state level security. So it's costly, but at the end of the day, the licenses are reusable. So we don't have to keep buying, because a lot of the government resources spent on Microsoft Office.
Can you share how many licenses we have right
So currently, the purchase is 1,000 licenses. The current number that we have in reserve after my auditing, we are now down to 40. So we don't give out those licenses anymore unless your role is imperative to your duties. But if you're just going to go in and review, we do our best to just see if you can get a report done by somebody else, because they it's limited. And the Cato licenses as well, if I could just mention that, we're down to 3 licenses from 500. So we don't exceed. So we have to, it's normally me that I would say, sorry, I can't approve your request because I only have 3 left, or I only have 10 left. So, but if the secretary says we have to give it, then, she overrides that rejection.
Yeah, our priority is for Munis users, because they need a M365 account to access their Munis account. So it's to main approvers, main preparers, the administrative staff, and then we expand from there. The only department that has full access to the M365 is the Department of Finance. This is how we work together. This is how, like Kina mentioned, the OneDrive and the shared drive, we use that completely in what we do. For example, departments now submit their drawdown requests through our M365 deposit. It gets shared, it's stored there, it's ready for audit, it's more accessible. So we're fully utilizing our M365, and I'm hoping that we can make that transition where all departments and agencies and government users transition into this more secure platform, rather than having Gmails and Hotmails and just all these different email platforms, and be on the M365 for government. Yeah.
So just to make that clear, just because we do have shared folders, but just to be very clear, it's upon approval. So if the secretary doesn't share that file with me, I don't have access. So it's as long as she invites you to the shared folder, that's the only way that you can see it, that's visible to you.
So for example, the shared folder for the drawdowns is only shared within the federal programs and the people within their program that have access to submit a drawdown request. So it's not open to the entire department or to everybody that has a Munis user access. It's shared specifically with who needs access to that folder. So that's an example of what Kina's talking about. Yeah. And I think that is the end of our presentation. So we're open for any questions.
Sorry, before we let Ms. Babauta go, what do you mean, or what will happen when we lose update on Munis? The ability to update and fix.
And what does it look like right now to update?
Or the fixes will no longer be available. Can you just expound on that?
Right now, per my discussion with Mr. Darrell Tomakani regarding updates, we are limited to up to 2025. So if we don't have the updates in place, we can still use it. We just can't get the support and the security that comes with the updates. So we can still use it, but at the level of their final support for on-prem. So they're not necessarily forcing us, but they would like us to move out of on-premises equipment, and would like us to move into the cloud. So the support is on time, and it's kind of real time, I guess, with the time difference of 4 to 3 hours, but it's on time and on real time. Okay. What would it look like? We would still be stuck if I could just use operating systems, we would be stuck in Windows 10 versus jumping up to the better versions of security and proper applications and bugs. So the updates do fix the bugs that we would be encountering.
So how would this look like in the long run when operating systems are being updated or new equipment are?
That's why it's recommended that we transition to the cloud, because then we get real-time updates to our Munis system, rather than having like the Windows 10 while everybody else is getting the newer updates and the bugs cleaned. For example, we found one bug where an account, how do I put this easily? The detail reports that are being printed don't match what the account balances that are coming up, and we're wondering why the detail is not matching the summary. And we're trying to find on our own what's going on. Nobody could find it, only to find out from Tyler that, oh, that was a bug. And for those that are on the cloud, it's been resolved. It matches now. Unfortunately for us, because we're on-prem, we're not getting that bug fix until we get the 25 update, which is next year. So we have to deal with those kind of bugs until we get the next update, which is a year later, rather than the other states that already have it instantly. Once they find it, it's fixed. So that's just one small example of why we need to stay updated with
So
our system.
our updates is manual. So someone has to come in at midnight to do the updates, and if the time difference, if we're not able to get Tyler on call, then we would have to push that to we can reschedule again. So our updates currently is manual updates. So we have to schedule 2 people to go in at night because we do updates after 7 p.m. We take into consideration that, you know, there might be some users at late at night, but we do make that information saying, hey, we're going to be taking on the system, doing some updates. But here locally is we need to make time for our personnel to go in versus the cloud, it's instant. So we just make sure go in, it's updated, then that's kind of how that works.
Thank you. Senator Carl?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to touch briefly. You spoke a lot about cybersecurity, the firewall, antivirus. I wonder when the Office of Internet Technology was first formed, one of the components, or my assumption was that it would be a repository, a place where all of the government agencies would be able to funnel their requests for different devices so they were compatible throughout the CNMI. Is that still a mandate of the OIT, or has that been changed?
So yes, sir, it's still the process, and I'm usually the one that it reposits to. So I'm very aware of all the technology that comes through for the government in general. Autonomous or not, if I am in your workflow, it will come to me. If I have issues, I talk to the vendor or the customer, which would be either you or Senator Magofnia, either one. I will always make it a point to talk to either or both. So what I like to do is it's a teaching experience for me to everyone else, so I can help you guys understand. That way your next purchase, it's just a smooth transition from there. And yes, it does come through OIT. I do review it. If I have issues, I will reject it with notes. And if I have no issues, I will just immediately approve it.
And last question is, obviously on the second and first senatorials, they've been talking about some of the issues that they've had with regards to just internet technology, not necessarily anything under your purview, but how there's not one centralized office that provides internet assistance to the various departments and agencies. So I was wondering if is that something that is going to be looked at in the future with regards to like connectivity, Ethernet lines, or mesh Wi-Fi, all of the things that fall under what I imagine is under OIT.
Yes, sir. I do understand the question. So just to briefly explain that is, if a policy is set in place that OIT will be the deciding factor on your ISP. So with that is, there are some departments where I would question, like, okay, so why are we going with this? What is the purpose for this hardware? I like to talk to the DOCOMO or IT&E. I would say, hey, what's going on? Why are we using mesh? So is the mesh environment compatible to Munis? If it's not compatible, okay, let's go over it. Is your hardware compatible to Munis? If not, we'd have to go over it. If the services you are providing is not compatible to Arcado, I have issues. So it's each department. There's always a pushback, right? It's expected 100%, but it's a teaching environment for me. So it's either I work with IT&E or DOCOMO, I educate the client, and then we come to a compromisation and make it work. As long as I'm able to provide you to have you purchase the correct software, then the ISP has to follow suit. So it's a really by department basis and what their preferences are versus what I would like to enforce, but I don't have that authority. OIT does not have that authority. We just recommend and guide, basically is all that we can do. But we're doing good so far. So it seems to be working out.
Thank you for that. And how you my time?
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So, staying on the topic of cybersecurity, I've been receiving some suspicious emails lately. Last month and just yesterday, I've received some emails from supposedly the Senate president. And then yesterday, I received an email from supposedly the governor asking me to take care of some task discreetly. So I wonder if that's something that needs to be reported to your office or, yeah.
So for Department of Finance, I again do the cybersecurity awareness. So whenever it gets reported to us, I send out a mass email to Department of Finance, municipality included. So Tinian Road and Saipan, they all get my email. Again, I'm not privy to the IT for the legislative bureaus, so education would be your best bet. And
Okay.
if it's something that you would like to report to us, we would have to work with the IT for here.
Okay.
So it's a mutual respect between the two. We don't want to just barge in and say, "Hey, you're doing this wrong." We want to come in and say, "How can we help?"
Okay.
So it's all education. So I would like to just give me a few minutes on. I'm very strong on cyber awareness. So if you do receive it, a lot of the times my email is repetitive. Make sure the email address is correct. Make sure, because if the context starts with "hello friend," it's an automatic no, right? Or "hi, how are you?" Right? It's an automatic no, because it's social experimenting. If you know how someone talks to you,
Right.
it kind of matches how the context of the email
Yes.
is. So if it doesn't match, one of two things is you forward it to your IT, you block it. Oh, sorry, one of two things. So you forward it to your IT, you block it, you delete it.
Okay.
So if you guys have what we would have as a central antivirus, your IT folks will immediately archive it, do their research, and do what they have to do to make sure that the next time it happens, it'll automatically be blocked or quarantined.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I yield for now, Chair.
Thank you, Vice. At this time, we'll start off with general questions for maybe all the divisions, and then I think some members have specifics. But before I hand the floor over to the members, just a couple of clarifying questions. This is for rev and tax. You provided data on the different refunds and how much has been refunded. Do you know where we're at in terms of disbursement, what the process is, or how frequently are they being dispersed? How many percent have you dispersed towards towards the total filers that you've received? And so, is that something that you have available with you?
Sorry, Mr. Can you please?
So
rephrase?
you've indicated that you've issued out 5.4 million in refunds, 6.5 in child tax, and then EITC. Where are you at in regards to the disbursement schedule and percentage of dispersed refunds based on total filers?
Okay. You want me to?
I
Go
can
ahead.
share some of the stats
Sure.
that
Yeah.
she shared with me last week on the pending tax returns. So we are near 90% complete. We have what we call category 1, which are simple returns with just wages. We have about 350 returns pending data entry. We have category 2 Category 2 it has additional schedules, maybe a child tax or EITC or education tax credits. This means it's a more complex return that we have 1,784 or 40 folders in boxes pending entry. And then we have what we call category 3, which are the most complex returns. These are individuals with business income. So most likely have more complex schedules attached, also pending system development. We have about 18 folders. That's how many boxes? Maybe 5 boxes.
That's about 5 boxes.
5 boxes pending entry.
Yeah.
So the category 3 is usually the most complex returns and also the last to be developed by our developer, our tax system. So we do it in phases so we can at least push more refunds out while we're developing the more complex system. So I think as of last week, they were doing the testing and
Right.
finalizing for that. So as an overall tax season, we're about 90% done. We just have this last bit of complex returns.
Right.
90% inclusive of categories 2 and 3.
Yeah, 1, 2. Like, so for everything that we've received to date, we're about 90% there because we have category 3 and category 2 still pending entry. And then you mentioned disbursements. We have a weekly disbursement schedule, which Ms. Pauline uploads to Treasury on a weekly basis, most likely on a Friday, and it includes this tax season and even prior tax seasons because taxpayers can still come in and file prior tax years. So those are being processed as well.
Okay. Thank you. No, when we had our meeting with MBA, there was sorry, it's a separate topic. We had a meeting with MBA and they brought up the statute that sets aside hot monies for hot enforcement officers. Have you hired enforcement officers specifically for the collection of hotel occupancy tax?
Some enforcement personnel are partially funded by the hotel occupancy tax collections that are for DRT. They are cross-trained. They don't just focus only on hotel occupancy. They focus on all. Like she mentioned, the enforcement branch does e-gaming, poker. They do business license. So it's all of them. Yeah.
So based on your collections of the hotel occupancy, have you met the projections thus far or are you exceeding the projections?
With our Q2 report, I believe we're exceeding forecasts for the hotel occupancy category. Yeah.
Okay. And also, according to MVA, they've projected 7.2 million for next fiscal year, but the budget submission only reported 5.3. Is there a reason why? I mean, if MVA does these projections, which I assume is what the administration uses year after year to report, why wasn't the 7.2 reported for next fiscal year?
It's a difference in the way that we forecast revenues. They have different factors that they are using for their forecast. We're using actuals. So we look at the actual collections, and then from there we estimate whether it's going to increase by 3% or decrease. So I would say my assumption is that they have other factors in their forecasts that are not being used in ours.
But you're currently projecting more than what? You're currently collecting more than what you've projected.
Yeah.
So hasn't that?
So for that category, I believe we projected this year for about 4 million, and then it's going up a little bit to 5, but not to 7. So again, we have a more conservative approach in increasing the revenues versus maybe they have more other factors, maybe high season and peak and other things that they're including in their forecast. That might be the cause of the difference in the increase that they're willing to put in their forecast. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone for revenue tax?
One more question.
So Vice Chair and then Senator Jude. Recognize Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So, staying on the topic of hot tax, so I know you explained that the discrepancy between your projections for FY25 is because you're using actuals versus what they're projecting. What I guess what I'm trying to understand is your definition of revenue the same definition as collections? Because you,
Yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Is there a reason
Collection and-
why your revenues is your collections?
Can you explain the question?
So your revenues is what is generated. Your collections is not always going to be 100% collection. So when you forecast your projection based on actual,
Mhm.
it's understating, and that could be the reason why your collections in second quarter is higher than what was projected. So in any business, right, your revenues is different from your collections, and that's why you have, amounts sitting in your receivables, your aging report, because your revenues is never going to be equal to your collections, because your collections are always lagging, right? So if somebody files their BGR, this month, they reported how much revenue they generated, but then they don't necessarily pay 100% of the revenues that they generated. They may pay partial payments. So this is why I'm asking, why is the revenues equal your collection?
So our actuals that we provide in our report are the actual cash received,
I
actual
agree.
payments made on
I understand.
tax.
Yes.
So you mentioned also that taxpayers report, they file their revenues and their taxes that are due,
Right.
but they may not actually pay the entire thing. And so the remaining amount, let's say of $100, if they only paid $80,
Mhm.
the $80 would be reported as an actual collection,
Right.
versus the $20 would be added onto the AR. And the AR is our accounts receivable, our tax receivable, which is not part of our revenue collection. So that's the difference. As far as hot,
But projection wise, right? So the $100 is 100% of what was generated as revenue, but only 80% was collected. So when you're projecting your revenues, shouldn't you go with the what was actually generated in revenues versus your collection? I mean,
No.
I know you're trying to go the conservative way, right? And that's not a bad thing, right? But it also skews the report when you show the reports of what was actually, like your quarterly reports, right? Because now you're saying that your collections is higher than what was collected, but really in reality, you didn't really collect higher. You just because does that make sense?
I'm trying to keep separate the different definitions.
Right, because they're different buckets,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you have your
so-
actual revenues that were generated, and then
Yeah.
you have your collections
Yeah.
that you actually collected, your actual.
Those are the same thing. So I'm trying to say that our collections, but whenever we say collection, it's what we actually collected in cash, was deposited into our account. and
I
used for
understand that, but
payroll.
what was reported
Yeah.
as in the filing. So when the tax return when the BGR is filed,
Mhm.
right, it shows that the total revenues generated for that month is $100, right? That's recorded in the system. However, the taxpayer is unable to pay the full $100, so therefore only $80 was collected in cash, right, and the $20 goes into the receivable account. But in actuality, so you have the two equations. So you have the $80 and the $20 sitting in the receivable. But when in actuality, you generated $100 in revenue.
I want to clarify that when we provide revenue reports on a quarterly basis, it's on the actual receipt, the $80.
Sure.
So we don't overstate revenues that are generated. We only report revenues that are collected, received, actual in the bank. So that's what is being reported as a revenue. And that is the portion that's used for the forecast. We don't forecast on amounts that we don't know when with reasonable certainty will be paid. That $20 might be paid in the next 10 years if the taxpayer proves that they have hardship and they enter an installment agreement. And so in that case, we'd be overstating revenues for budget appropriation if we included the entire $100. So our approach at finance has always been to use the actual revenues received and use that as the basis for our revenue projection. I hope that makes sense.
Okay.
I understand where you're coming
I
from,
do.
Senator.
Yes, yes.
But it's always
Like-
been our practice not to overstate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Like I said,
Yeah.
conservative is always best, right? But just so that we are truly understanding the picture of what was actually generated in revenues for the fiscal year, it's important to know what the big picture is and then drill it down, to the details of it. So I just wanted to get an understanding of that so that we understand when we get those reports and we see that there was an increase in collection versus what was projected. It's not necessarily that the collection would increase, it's just that we underprojected, right, based on actuals, right?
Yes.
But for some reason, maybe the taxpayers were able to pay 100% of what was owed, right? So just understanding the gaps, right? Because I would, if I was to look at the report and saw that there was an increase in collection of, let's say, 20% versus what was projected, I would want to know what caused that increase, right? And part of the factor would be because the projections were based on actual collections and not necessarily, right? Okay. And then still in with revenue and tax. So I know that you said that you guys are at about 90% completion, right, with the processing of tax refunds. How many in total filings did revenue and tax receive for FY23 or calendar year 23?
We have, this is just
So
a
total,
rough, Senator.
total filings that were submitted to revenue and tax.
With all the categories that we just said.
Yes, just total. That's okay. Estimate.
Estimate.
Yes.
We're looking at a total of about, and I stand corrected,
Sure.
about 27,000 plus.
27,000. Okay, so
Yes.
about 27,000, and out of the about 27,000, how many were individual tax filings?
These are all individual filing.
Okay, so what I was asking is total filings for all the different categories that you guys have. So from
Okay.
individual to business tax filings.
Okay.
So
for the-
27,000 for individuals then.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And they
And-
go by the different phase that we mentioned
Yes,
earlier,
yes.
which is the simple return
Yes.
of wages and salary. That's a category 1. We were looking at about 19,000. No, 23,000 total.
Of just the category.
Wages and
cat one.
salary, just the simple wages and
Okay.
salary. On what the secretary mentioned to you earlier, category 2, which
Mhm.
is more of a schedule. We're looking into the 18 to 1900 plus. And then the most complex, which is the category 3, we're looking at about 800 to 900 total. Anything on the differences of that I just mentioned goes back to the wages and salary
Okay.
of the simple filing.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that data. So
Mm.
for the category 1, which is about 23,000 filings, how much of that is already completed? Would you?
Okay. You want me to go ahead? Yeah, for category 1, the filing itself is about what?
Sorry, Senator, are you asking how many is pending?
Pending?
Processing?
Sure.
Awesome.
So there's an approximately 23,000 not dollars,
Almost
23,000 filings for personal, in
Mhm.
category 1, right? Individual tax filings.
Like I said,
And out
yeah.
of the 23,000, how many are already completed and how,
As of
or how many spending?
July, as of July 24, we have 350 returns pending entry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So out of the 23,000, we have 350
Awesome.
left to go.
Okay.
But just understand that taxpayers continue to come in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
yes.
so that number
it
always
was-
changes. But
Changes.
but
And-
we're mostly done. We're
Okay.
almost there for category 1. Then category 2, we had that 1,784.
Pending.
And
Okay.
category 3 was 870. So we have approximately like 3,000 returns to go,
Okay.
with the overall 27,000 that was received.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for pushing out those tax refunds. I know that many of us get calls from our tax filers, just wanting to get status updates on their refunds, and understandably, but thank you for all your efforts. How many employees or staff do you have under this section that's processing all the tax filing?
For revenue, we have a total of about 48, including our legal counsel. There's about 47 total. On the compliance sites where they do the majority of the input, the
Okay.
data
Entry.
entry, we have about 21,
21.
22. Yes,
Okay.
22 staff.
Okay.
Yes.
Does revenue and tax or finance have any plans on going online for tax filings, at least for the category 1s? It's,
Wait, Senator Karina, I just reversed. When I said 22, that is on the compliance site.
okay.
But on the data entry, the people that does the data entry on a daily basis, you're looking less than what? 4 to 5. It's even sometimes just 2 people
Okay,
because of the
so 4 to
shortage
5
of
people data
manpower.
entry.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. On your next question,
So
Senator.
the next question is: are there any plans to have the option to file online, at least for category 1 tax filers?
Yes, that's
Yes.
part of our new software development.
Awesome.
That's towards the last phase,
Okay.
where we'll have a citizen portal. The plan is to have at least the simple returns
Yes.
being able to file online. So that's part of the plan. That's part of the design. Yeah.
Okay. And when do we? When is the estimated timeline for that to go live?
We have our target is for next year, but it's for the internal part to go live. As far as the external facing, which is the citizen portal,
Mhm.
that might be towards the end of next year, so the
Towards-
following
okay.
tax year.
Okay. That's great news. I know a lot of people are going to be happy, and that kind of takes care your issue of understaffed, right? Because if people can do their own data entry into the system, that would alleviate a lot of the scarce resources that you have right now. And then, so under tax collection task force, how much in total is in arrears? So is that the 14.46 million?
That was the collection
Collection.
on the AR.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that was collection on AR.
Yeah.
So how much is still showing on the AR?
So when we initiated the task force, it was around 120 million. That was our last budget hearing.
Mhm.
And then part of the task force work is also to review the AR, what is still collectible, what is still within the statute of
Gotcha.
limitation. And so I believe the AR was brought down to about 40 million. That was targeted for collection from the task force. So out of that 40 was 14 through all these efforts. And so our recent effort with the Baltimore Tax Clinic was to provide legal services for
Mhm.
these businesses, so that usually they don't know how to compromise
Mhm.
and pay off their tax debt. So these the tax clinic gave them some legal advice on how to proceed so that they can pay off what's
Okay.
remaining. Yeah.
So last year you've identified about 120 million of
Mhm.
receivables, and out of that 40 million is deemed collectible.
Yeah.
And then out of that 40 million, 14 million has already been
Yeah.
collected. So are we saying that
It's
80?
not a static number. That
Sure.
number will change every month, every year, but then
Yes.
at least that was our target for the task force. Yeah.
Okay. And so just to clarify, about $80 million is deemed uncollectible because of statute of limitation.
Yeah. Business no longer here, like those things. Yeah.
Wow, that's a very
And that number is from inception. It's more than the 120 million was more than just 10 years ago. It's
sure
from
going back.
to when the system started.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let me ask you this then. Maybe going back 3 years, how much of the 80 million would you say could have been collected? So this is up till when, like the 2020? No, so is it 7 years for statute of limitation for tax? 10. So 2023. So going back 2013. Okay, never mind. We just move forward. I think you also mentioned that there's about 226 delinquent cases, and this is going back as far as when?
That's part of the
task
task
force.
force. So these are taxpayers that came forward
Oh,
and
okay.
wanted to come into a installment plan or just review their cases. So it became an active case rather
Got
than a
it.
sitting collection case. So we have 5 revenue officers that these have been distributed. 2 of those officers are currently in Guam. Those are our lead ROs that lead the task force.
Okay.
And then we have 2 additional enforcement officers that have been transferred down to collection branch to help. So currently, I'm proud to say they're in the advanced revenue officer training with the IRS. It's a 6-week intense training. That's why they'll be back, I think, in September. And so that team is the key team to the task force. And so because we have taxpayers coming forward, because we have the tax clinic, and we have these pending cases now on our side for review, this key team will come back with strategies on how we can now move forward with the pending cases that we have.
Thank you, Secretary. I have to commend your efforts and your initiatives in making sure that proper training is given to your staff, to be able to enforce a lot of these issues that we faced. And so I know that Ms. Capileo here said that the enforcement team is currently understaffed. You have 4 staff under enforcement. 2 of them are collections and the other 2 is enforcement, but you also have some assistance coming from other government agencies such as zoning, commerce, labor, and lieutenant governor. Are you able to give us the number of staff that these agencies have given to you? So like under zoning, how many staff from zoning is helping?
We can give you an updated
An
roster.
updated,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. That's all I have under revenue and tax, Chair.
Thank you, Vice. Sorry, before I hand the floor over to Senator Jude, the 6 employees under financial services that are working on the federal accounts, are they locally funded?
I'll refer that question to
They are?
Director Bernie.
If they are locally funded, are they able to be paid off by the IDCs if we transition those FTEs to, say, another division?
Yeah, there's 4 that are paid locally and 2 under a federal grant.
So it is possible to get the additional 4 fully funded by the IDC, correct? Okay, so we can move that 4 towards another division if that may. Okay, sorry. I have more questions for financial services, but this time I recognize Senator Hofschneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary and your team. Good morning. First of all, I want to thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing. I can see the passion that Ms. Capileo was pleading to the members to consider. You did an outstanding job, by the way.
It gets so cold in here.
No, it's fine.
When you're getting old.
So just kind of staying within topic. And Mr. Chairman, I have to tell myself that this is not a budget hearing to look at the collections for FY 2025, and it's a budget hearing for the operations and the FTEs for for Department of Finance. So I'm trying to not, go behind that. But um, during your tax collection task force, what did you have again? How many people went out and did they go out and visit the bricks and mortars of the operators? Or can you
Yes.
just?
That's correct. We started last year, July, and
July.
that's considered like our, towards the tail end of the tax season for that year. So we actually shift resources within DRT. So everybody go and be part of the task force and whatever the task force needs to start up. So DRT plays a huge role in shifting resources, and then additional people from the other departments and agencies that were able to help. They split into two teams. One team goes out into the field. They print out a list, everybody that was on that AR, and they go have a visit, and then they do a site inspection and a report on the status of the business, whether they're still active, whether the person with authority is on island, somebody that can make decisions on their tax liabilities. Then they bring it back to the second group that has the updating of the collection files, the case management, enter it into the system and things like that. So the big effort was last year, and now it's about case management.
So because I don't know how the SOP is. So a collection, a contingent of help from other agencies, not necessarily just finance, but you mentioned what?
Right
Zoning?
now we have about 7 or 8, but in the beginning we had almost 12 people.
That's sufficient to do the.
The outcome is because of the amount of support that we had. So again, if we have a bigger team, we will have a bigger outcome.
Was there a reason that we scale back?
Tax season. So
Okay.
it's almost like
Right.
shifting.
No,
the
I mean
team.
like the help from the other agencies.
Oh, it's on a case-by-case basis. Some of the departments have other, they have their audits and they have their things going on, so they shift the amount of people that they're able to provide. But again, at this point, it's more on case management rather than out in the field doing casework. So our focus now is to increase capacity in-house so that we can move forward with the collection on the cases.
So earlier there was a question on the consequences as a result of non-compliance. Has there been a decision rendered by your task force to not give business license to this non-compliant operator?
That's a normal business practice.
How about with
DRT.
with this exercise that you're all doing?
Mhm.
Was there a actual, like, I didn't pay for X number of years, and I keep, you keep giving me the flags, but I keep ignoring it, but I still get my business license every year. Have you like penalized me because I haven't been compliant? Has that been happened? Did it ever occur with this exercise?
For business license specifically,
Because you got to be compliant, right?
Mhm.
In order for you to continue right?
Yes.
business
I mean, that's
license
the
is a little
exercise,
bit
correct?
different.
That's the exercise that we're trying to do. Is you're trying to make sure that they're whole, or at least 95%. So if they're
To
not
answer your
whole,
question, we haven't revoked.
okay,
It would just change the status for that taxpayer, and it's when they come in for a renewal, which happens with every taxpayer every year. There's a flag for business license that they would
Okay.
have to be in compliance. So
Sure.
let's say, like, give you an example. Somebody comes in to renew their license and the flag's up. They owe taxes. They would go to collection branch.
and they
sign-
comply.
They comply right away,
Okay.
right? And then they go and they renew their license. However, the next month they don't pay their tax. But at that
Okay.
moment when they renewed, they were in compliance. So at least at that point of renewal, we capture them into the collections. But then it's a matter of case management. Again, you have to keep sending those notices, the billing notices. So there's a taxpayer, their taxpayer rights in the process
Sure.
of collection. So it's an ongoing kind of process for DRT. And it's something that we just have to deal with.
Okay. Well, I just, for us that especially the viewing public that we're not unfamiliar with that, but it's the initiative is actually we appreciate it. because for the entire business community out there. In the task force, do you have like personnel from zoning?
Yes, we do.
Does the one of the line of questioning is compliance with zoning,
But the zoning, there was.
or just this tax?
It's specifically tax. So anyone.
So what's zoning doing there?
So it's just additional manpower. So anyone from another agency that came over willing to help on the task force were trained as tax
Okay.
agents. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe this is something that I suggest. Just have them also incorporate. I mean, I know it's asking a lot, maybe, but if you're there already,
No, I'm sure
So,
that if they get
and-
additional information, it can be
Sure.
shared with other enforcement agencies.
the other thing, ma'am, is
I know zoning was there, but then
Public Works there, building safety.
zoning did participate in our task force.
No, but like,
But-
are they asking zoning questions, zoning compliance questions, or
No.
just you
No.
owe taxes to the government?
It was only
No.
for the scope of tax collection.
Only for the
Yeah.
scope. Because in order for you to renew your license or to get your license, you have to comply first with zoning. Then from zoning comes over.
And that
to-
gave rise to my question,
Yeah,
Ms.
yeah.
Capileo.
So
So, but how about DPW?
BGR,
And,
What?
DPW
DPW.
No, it's
I
for
know.
building safety.
it wasn't an overall
Okay.
permitting or license enforcement. It was focused solely on tax collection.
Okay, and I, I'm just asking because
we
I
can have
kind of
another
like a
task force.
suggestion also to because you guys are doing outstanding, but if we can expand it so you can minimize the, maybe they can comply from A to Z, so that they don't, they become whole. So that's
Okay.
just the, what I'm trying to get to, but the collection that was you said $14 million for this fiscal year, or?
No, that's in the context of the task force from beginning of the initiation of the task force till now.
So what about this year? How many have you yielded?
I don't have
Yeah,
the numbers broken
no.
down by fiscal year. It's just a total productivity of the task force.
Okay.
We can give you-
Just sticking with the subject, I don't want to get off track. So I'm gonna shift a little bit over to the HOT and primarily on Airbnb. What's the process as far as registering as an Airbnb in the CNMI? Yeah.
I believe the process is standard for all business license. You identify the industry that you're in and the tax activity, and that's it.
Okay. So just recently, the vice president had mentioned, MBA was here, and of course they deal with the business of tourists, but they're not mandated to be the one to police the Airbnb, and it's actually financed. So I'm just curious, how far are we as far as the implementation of actually going out there and say, Jude, your Airbnb, we give you a license, but it seems like you're not paying, you're not reporting it on time, and this is just revenue for not only HOT but also for you guys. So can you just expound on that a little bit?
Sure. So tax enforcement includes, and the tax collection task force, all tax types. And so if you're talking about just Airbnbs, there's two kinds of enforcement for that. And the enforcement section, like Ms. Pauline said, has 4 people, but 2 people moved down to be part of the task force. So the remaining 2, they handle business license enforcement, meaning they just look at the type of license and activity you're licensed for, and then go out and confirm whether they're still in the same line of business or whether they need to update their license or get another license. And that doesn't discriminate whether it's an Airbnb or tour operator, right?
Okay.
So that's just the general approach to business license enforcement. So when you get over to the collection of hot, usually the enforcement branch, if they have any findings on their site visits, just looking at compliance of business license requirements, they forward it over to collection branch, Like this is actually an Airbnb. They should be paying hot. Then it goes over to collection branch, add that onto their
Yeah.
case.
Secretary, let me ask you this. It's much easier to track HOT if it's a HANMI member.
Yeah.
And much difficult for Airbnb because they're not HANMI members.
Mhm.
Do you recommend that now that we're going E with a declaration of your customs declaration, that we actually ask this question on the way out? But where do they stay?
Oh, there's
Because it's too late to track them down if they're already checking out and they're leaving.
I'll defer to Colonel Atelig on the actual form, but yes, that did come up in our discussions on the design on how to capture tourists, right, or travelers.
The reason why I'm asking this
is
is gaginti tita catch as an HOT, as an occupant of an Airbnb, which is required by I think 18 by something law. If they're not reporting accurately and we're trying to get there, wouldn't it be advantageous if we capture it on the way out?
So yes, yeah. So actually, we can ask them the question at the line, the primary counter, where they're going to be staying at. We can do verification as far as reservation on where they're going to be staying at. As far as the passenger telling us the truth at the spot, I mean, that's a give and take, right? Because if I was gonna come to Saipan and live in a place where I only pay $20 and avoid all the taxes, I mean, if I wasn't um, a normal traveler, I mean, I think I would do that. But again, asking the question, it's not a problem. Verifying the information as far as reservation electronically or hard copy, we can do that as well.
the possibility is there. It did come up during our design. However, it's more of a survey, exit survey, and that's the discussion that MBA brought up.
I'm actually speaking on terms of exiting fee. It's not a coming in fee, it's exit fee.
Oh,
I mean, for those that are not staying at the HANMI, it's just a thought. So, because there was a concern raised by MBA because of the non, they're not, it's not, the numbers aren't matching. The people coming in and the actual money collected by the HANMI, organization. So we're just trying to, like what Miss Pauline was keep asking, we to work together. So this is part of the work together. We're trying to, flush down how can we narrow that discrepancy.
I think, Senator, there is a big loophole on Airbnb anywhere in the world, and we all know that. As far as enforcing it, I think you need dedicated people that would actually, for example, like MVA, share the type of hotels where these guys are going to be staying at and things, and then you get your enforcement together and go out there and visit these places. And the only way you're going to know their physical address is through business license.
Okay.
Because, I mean, that's one way of trying to track them down.
Okay.
Conducting surveillance, taking photos, tourists walking in, with suitcases. On the street.
Then that's the reason why I'm asking,
Yeah.
because you've probably seen it in the streets
yes.
that there's people like dragging their bags,
Yeah.
along the road, and I can suspect that that didn't come from Crown or
Yes.
the former Hyatt. Anyhow, so just a thought, Secretary, that we bring up so that we can again, be part of the solution. Mr. JJ Regis, while you're there, I'm sorry, JJ Atalik, customs and quarantine. What's this? You guys assume the responsibility also of biosecurity, with
Yes.
when we join with quarantine.
Yes, we do.
So what's the process now? I mean, who handles it? It's just quarantine.
So
Your staff at quarantine, or there's cross checking happening? Yeah.
So biosecurity, customs and biosecurity. So biosecurity is technically the quarantine division back then. So they all report under one director, which is Director Jose Mofnas.
Um, you- is there any room for improvement, or is there any concerns that we need to know as far as the
Um,
way
So
things are? I mean,
yeah, on the biosecurity side, I know that we had some officers that have been to Guam, cross training with the Guam Customs and Quarantine, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So we do have and USDA as well. We do have officers dedicated to be part of that team only, which is the biosecurity side. Um, Endangered species and all this stuff, right? Invasive. We do have officers that actually work on that site. We haven't seen any. We're still crossing a finger, and we're working hard to to do inspection and try to eliminate it at the border before it get passes the border.
thank you. That's good to hear, Mr. Atlik. If I may suggest, I think you know this. The coconut rhino beetle is in Guam and now in Rhoda.
Yes.
Please don't get it to Saipan and Tinian and the Northern Islands. That's for sure, because we've seen what it takes. Okay, so just switching gears a little, Madam Secretary. This fiscal year we collapsed the 2% developers tax. How much have we yielded so far? And now it all goes to the general fund.
I can get that information for you. Is that specific to the municipalities?
No,
or
it's just the general
overall?
context. Yeah.
Okay.
And like I mentioned earlier, before I started my line of questioning, it's budget for your operations, not budget for the entire cinema. I think we're gonna have another meeting for that, no, Mr. Vice President? I don't want to, belabor the discussion. I'm gonna just contain it. Last question. The governor's proposal is 256, correct? NOPs. But what's enacted for FY 2024 is 241. So there's a decrease in 15, no? That sounds about right.
Yes. Go back to
Well, right, but what's enacted for 2024 is this budget right now is 241. But your request is 295 for FY 2025. So just encompassing, this is just the general fund. No? It's not inclusive of any outside. So what other like revolving fund you have that you're actually using it for personnel?
I believe if we have any revolving funds supporting personnel would be only for enforcement. Yeah. The rest are mainly general fund.
Obviously, it's not part of the FTE, no? This is the general fund?
The general fund would have the FTE because that would be the main source of funding. It would only be supported partially by any enforcement revolving fund that we have, and it would only be for DRT personnel.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you see right now is really the need for the department in terms of FTE and personnel for the current.
Okay. I have somewhat of a related question, but I'm going to yield my time now, Mr. Chairman, and allow other members to ask their question. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jude.
Secretary.
Thank you. Well, I know our hearing today is with the Secretary of Finance. We will be scheduling a separate meeting with just Secretary of Finance and OMB in regards to the general proposal from the administration as well. So that's if you have any questions that relates to the entire proposed budget, please reserve those questions for that time. So we'll just stick with the operations of finance for today. And so with that, I'll now recognize Senator Revolta, and then we have Senator Carl, and then Senator Dennis. Also,
Thank you,
with-
Chairman. Welcome to the Department of Finance. I have several questions for the different divisions of Department of Finance. One would be the cybersecurity issues. Can we have Ms. Babata? Are there any plans for the government to own its own domain? I'm talking about the emails, gov.mp or mp.gov, because I understand that is a privately owned domain and there are significant potential security risks associated with that. The private company's interests may not be the same as the government's. Private company may monetize, government information, things of that nature. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. So, the company's supply chain may insert, vulnerabilities to our system. So I'm wondering, is there any plan for the government to own its own domain for security reasons above all?
Thank you for your question. Yes, ma'am, there is. We actually had that in place
Okay.
a couple years ago, but there was a negotiation between cost. So with OIT, we went into, we are owning our own domain. So OIT had an official conversation with the SSAs to see if we can be a standard. So it's no longer, it will be for us in our instance, it would be either finance .gov,
Okay.
not .mp. It would be dpl.gov. So we are trying to stay within to comply with the entity so that we as SIPAN government agencies can be certified. Right now, we're not being recognized because some people use Gmail, some people
Yeah.
use Yahoo, some people use Hotmail. So that's where the M365 comes into play.
Okay.
So the M365 comes into play right now due to personnel resources, which were very lacking. We actually were supposed to start implementing finance.gov. But due to the influx of support required outside of M365, we had to sort of spread our resources out. So we didn't really have the one time or a certain 1 week of blocking everyone and just being able to do that. So we do have that in place. It's just for finance only right now so that we can be certified as an entity. But the goal was to get all of the department
Okay.
as a certified entity. So it'll be recognized to any federal grant. So anyone within the federal community.
Okay. The other issue is because it is a privately owned domain, who owns the emails of former government employees? Now we're dealing into proprietary issues.
So right now, we
And
archive.
does finance or anybody in the government have access to that if there be an investigation?
So right now, that's where again, the level of server that we have with the M365 is state level. It is federally recognized. So it's not a proprietary to them, it's proprietary to us. We archive our files. So as long as it stays within, I think there's a limitation of 30 to 60 days. If it stays within that, then we archive that for that long, and then it tends to go away, at least to my understanding of that.
We're having issues right now with even finance is having issues with reconciling all the migration from JD Edwards to Munis and finding out where all this ARPA funds. There's even a special committee set up for it. So my issue is it's in the community. The devil is in the details. Communications will tell you what they did with the money. So who owns those previous emails? And can you access it?
So for the gov.m,
Yes.
wait,
That's a private domain owned by a private company.
I apologize. So I totally forgot about the Google Suite. So for the Google Suites, that actually came into play just last year to OIT. So whoever the IT was that was administering that, prior to it being handed over to us, we can't go back and record or review that. But moving forward, the only thing that OIT does for the Google Suites, which is the .gov.mp, is we through proper protocols and requests, we provide you the Gmail, the Google Suites ID, which is your gmail.com. So we provide IDs, but in terms of we don't go in and archive. So if someone goes in and starts deleting, that's really out of our control just because we don't have the full capacity to go in and say, all right, all emails are to be archived to here.
So who has access to the previous emails
Who has access to the previous emails?
prior to this
Prior
handing
to the
over?
handout?
Yeah.
Okay. Senator, sorry, I'm not really sure of who the IT was. I know of a few, but I don't really know who was the designated administrator to the Google Suites gov.mp.
Wow. Okay, now that we have that answer. What is okay, let's stick to the budget issues. There are other systemic issues that I wanted to get into, but I'm not gonna delay this. I see in your budget submission that there are 2 employees from the Department of Public Lands being paid for by the Department of Finance. Why is that?
That is due to the transition of the DPL Operations Fund, having DOF as a co-trustee of the financial portion of DPL. And so we recently discussed with DPL the transition of their accounting staff. We received an LSR from the AG's office to interpret the statute. Sorry, I don't have the exact statute in my head, but it's in regards to the DPL Operations Fund, where finance is now responsible to maintain the fund alongside DPL. So we had discussions with DPL. We had a listing of all their accounting staff and a list of their position descriptions, and tried to identify which of the employees actually have a finance function rather than a programmatic function. And after reviewing the list of employees, only 2 would be considered a finance staff. So this is an ongoing discussion with DPL because we're trying to find the best way to manage the fund, but also do our fiduciary duty to manage as finance. So for now, we've identified and agreed on 2, which is their finance director and I forget her title, but there's another staff below her.
The director and the accountant supervisor. So these funds that are paying these 2 DPL employees are coming from the operational funds of DPL.
Right now they're under the current DPL budget. However, we were advised that if they were to do a finance function, they'd have to be funded by the general fund and not DPL. So we have to share costs in order to do our part to be a co-trustee. So we had to ensure that they're part of the budget request.
Will this be a permanent situation?
It's part
Eventually
of the
they'll
statute.
be employees of finance?
No, they're doing both. Since they, according to DPL, they have some critical functions within DPL. Their capacity is limited. They are in charge of, doing fund certifications for their accounts. So they're a critical part of the program, but then they also have their duties under finance. So we're sharing the FTE and the cost.
Okay. So they're, in terms of personnel, they're still under the command and control of the public lands, but their funding is under your purview. That's interesting. How is the Department of Finance's communication with Department of Commerce? Recently, there was a business that was terminated due to non-compliance with commerce regulations. However, that business had, and they had not complied with commerce for the last 6-7 years. However, they had a valid business license issued by one of the municipalities, and I'm pretty sure this happens more frequently than that one incident. So how can finance and commerce and other
Mhm.
business regulatory agencies communicate better so that we can catch these? Because I don't understand why a business would have a valid business license without complying with their articles of incorporation.
I can speak on behalf of the Saipan Business License Office because I know that our office communicates daily with Department of Commerce Registrar's Office and
Okay.
Workers' Compensation. It's part of the business license review for a new business license or a renewal. And so we send the list of applicants to Commerce, and they do their check whether we're able to release on our side. So that's happening, I know, here on Saipan. So we work closely with Director
see.
Frank Cabrera, Remy Mofnas. The annual report, which is due to Commerce, is a requirement of your renewal, also on the new license as well. So in that way, I think our working relationship with Commerce is good. As far as the others that fall through the cracks, I can't say. I know that there might be some instances, but I know the general procedure is that the business license office communicates with Commerce on a daily basis to get a clearance of who, which licenses can be released.
Thank you. Also, I have reported businesses that operate on a cash-only basis, specifically a car wash who operates only cash basis. I made a conservative calculation assuming $25 per vehicle, 25 vehicles per day. It's about 625 per day. Per year, it's 225 of possibly underreporting or non-reporting from that business. And I think while I appreciate the strides that finance has made and all their divisions in trying to get on top of our collections and everything, I do think that this is another area where it needs serious attention, and perhaps it could be, part of whatever radar you guys are looking at. So I'd like to mention that. Alluding to Senator Jude Hofschneider's line of questioning with respect to zoning being a part of the tax task force, and he was asking about if Public Works, we've long been talking about a one-stop shop, and that was an opportunity, and we're trying to figure it out because they have different regulations to comply with, but we really need to start looking into that model of having a one-stop shop. And it was an opportunity, I think, for Department of Finance because they had all these extra bodies to help out with tax collection, but it could have been that it was an opportunity missed, I think, to establish that elusive one-stop permitting shop for investors, because we're knocking on every door to try and bring in investors, but it's so difficult with all the different regulation requirements, and I'm inclined right now to introduce legislation to suspend zoning because they're making it so difficult for investors, and these investors, current businesses here, call us weekly. And a businessman wants to expand his building by 10 feet. Zoning regulations allow him 13 feet, but he only wants 10, but zoning won't approve the permit because zoning is asking him, why not go 13? I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't get it. So it was an opportunity missed, I think, to test out a one-stop permitting model. And I hope you guys can consider looking into that because we're at a loss too. But those are all I have, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Mandela.
Thank you, Chair. Just one clarifying. As Senator Babalta had pointed out, this situation with that personnel that falls under Department of Finance and as well as working under DPL. Isn't that a conflict in fiduciary duty? Just wanted to, in terms of reporting or overseeing or ensuring that the agencies are doing what they're supposed to be doing. If you're working for both agency, so where does the line get drawn there?
Oh, I should thank you for the question. I should clarify that DPL is still part of the Munis workflow. So in terms of how I believe those two staff are assisting or supporting DPL, it's in terms of retrieving reports and understanding the reports in the system. However, in terms of finance responsibilities and process reviews, they still submit their procurement documents through Munis. It gets reviewed by procurement. It goes through financial services. So it has a separate, we have a separate function for the two people. They're not approvers the same way that the directors are approvers in the workflow.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that because it almost sounded like they submit all the reports and then they receive the report and process it as DOF staff. So I'm glad you clarified that. Also, I wanted to talk about the enforcement side, operational. Is DOF's responsibility or enforcement of collecting tax, does that offload into the municipality? Or does the municipality have their enforcement team that reports to central DOF? And the reason why I asked this is it almost sounded like when we were talking about tax collection in the municipality, it almost sounded like we're just waiting on Saipan to come and enforce this. So I just wanted to make sure that there's clarity there.
Not at the municipality. If I understood you, Senator, you were asking if there's any officer in the municipality?
As far as enforcement from
Enfor-
central that goes down there and enforces tax collection. Let's say Rhoda, for example. Do you guys send down enforcement or is
yes,
there?
we do.
Because that was the dialogue in one of the budget hearings, is that a lot of the tax collection or the enforcement comes from central.
I do know that there is a collaboration within the district, which is Tinian and Rhoda.
Okay.
They work with the headquarters, which is the CNMI, and they do down, if I'm not mistaken, every quarter or every 2 months, or I'm not so sure on that one, but I know that they do work as a team. They
Okay.
go down and they meet with the municipality.
Okay.
And-
So in that sense, then every quarter is kind of when you guys send down enforcement, or is there a SOP on when you guys go down, or is it just based on the discussion between the municipality and central if it's needed?
I know that for the enforcement branch, they have their operations plans, and usually that would include necessary review, for example, poker machines. And so when they're going to have to go and do that because it's required for tagging or replacement of the tags and just review of the machines, they also bring down another enforcement for business license and then an auditor, and they fly down to the municipalities to do that. I know that there has been, of course, capacity issues within the municipalities for revenue officers and auditors. So in that case, the 5 officers from Revenue Tax Saipan or the 4 auditors, they would assist, and we would send one at a time. So yeah, that's part of our capacity building that we need.
Okay. So one last question on that. Will it be possible for the enforcement team to train an enforcement
Yes.
individual down in Rhoda so that they can in turn enforce this tax collection, or anything in terms of tax enforcement? These employees can just go ahead and do that, then communicate with Saipan so that there's no gap. And the reason why, again, the reason why I'm asking is that the statement from the budget hearings that we just wait on stipend, and I refuse to just sit here and just kind of wait on Central to take action when
If
we
I'm
can
not
we can start
mistaken,
doing.
Senator, I do know that when the task force with the auditors, when they go down to the municipality, Tinian and Rhoda, they do train these
Okay.
people. And then from there, they do their collaboration of getting the reports on a monthly basis. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they do meet on a quarterly basis where they fly down or they come up because of the training or what have you. But they do work together. Yes.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before I hand the floor, just to Senator Mendiola's point, I think we've had discussion, Secretary, where we feel like there should be that autonomy between the districts in the sense where each district has their division or department of finance, but yet we lack the autonomy to make certain decisions like travel, like enforcement and the such, right? I mean, like, we have pretty much the different divisions set, but then they depend or they have to go through Saipan, whereas, they could be easily trained and do the same services that they do in Saipan, relieving some of the stress on the employees here in Saipan and just, handing that responsibility over to our people. So I don't know where we're at in terms of that discussion that we had. I remember it was here in the president's office with the mayor, but even for something as simple as passport applications, right? I know there was that discussion with Ms. Connie in regards to trying to get somebody in Rhoda, I guess, certified to receive applications or something to that effect, and then just simply handing that over to Saipan. So where can we as a municipality assist central finance in relieving some of that pressure here on Saipan and giving that responsibility to Rhoda to do these similar activities, right? And so I hope that's something that could be considered, or moving forward, so that there's more, the staff here are not stretched so thin in that sense. I recognize the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary, again, and your staff for being here to answer a lot of our questions. I think a lot of our questions have been directed towards the presentation that was given earlier. So I am mindful of that. We haven't really touched on the budget itself. So I'm going to start my line of questions directly towards the budget proposals. So I know that in the revised proposal that was submitted to the legislature, there was an increase of a little bit over $5 million to PSS, right? And this is in no way, I'm not saying I don't support the additional allocation to PSS, but what I do want to ask, or what I'm trying to get at, is an understanding of what the process is. Because I know that in the past budget allocations, the way that the calculation has been done is the 25% after all the debt service payments have been made. But in this revised calculation, it's different. So what changed? I know that the part of the clarification or justification was based on the Superior Court ruling, but in the last 4 fiscal years, the process has been different. So what?
I just thank you for that question. I think it's to clarify the PSS allocation, and our calculation did not change. The discussions with PSS included some critical factors that we needed to consider should their funding remain the same. One of those was the reduction in instructional days. And if we had not increased their budget, then basically one of the outcomes was diplomas would be, I forget what the term that they use, it wouldn't be accepted. It wouldn't be acceptable. So that was one of the main, and there are other operational needs, I guess, for the teachers to maintain the instructional days. And so it wasn't necessarily just the calculation of it, but it was the discussion to, okay, what how much do you really need to maintain the instructional days? And so we chipped at it that way, so that PSS could really just tell us exactly how much do you need to different scenarios. If they maintain the current funding at 28 million, if diplomas are useless basically, then what are we really doing for
Okay.
the schools? And so they said, okay, maybe we need 30 million, and then they came back again, and then they said they needed at least 33 or something like that. So we really had to scrutinize their need,
Okay.
and then be able to give them that.
Thank you for that clarification. I guess I guess what I'm trying to understand is if we were to go based on what's been mandated, right, which is the 25%, and they're requesting for additional because of all the other factors. I mean, we are in a situation where our financial resources is really minimal, right? And everybody's asking for money. And I'm not trying to, in any way, trying to say that PSS is not a priority or it's not important. But if we were to be fair and equal, to all the other departments who are requesting, I guess I'm just trying to. So the calculation is not the sole justification for the increase. It's because we've considered other additional requests on top. Okay, so that takes care of that. I could be mistaken, but I don't recall seeing budget for the Bank of Guam balloon payment of $19.8 million, which is due next August. Is there a reason why that wasn't included in the budget?
Yes, because we are in current discussions with Bank of Guam to extend the terms and change the terms of the balloon payment. And so that balloon payment would not be needed in FY25. And so because we knew that those were ongoing discussions, we are already finalizing the agreement with Bank of Guam to extend that to a 15-year term. The debt service for the Bank of Guam would remain the same. So it would not impact the budget.
Okay, so are we not expecting to pay anything next?
Just the debt service that's included in the budget.
Okay. Are there any additional interest or penalties for the extension?
No.
So they're willing to extend the, okay, that's good news. Okay. As for the SFRF, which is the ARPA funds, right? What is available as of today, if any?
I don't have the exact availability today, but I do know that we are finalizing our expenditure plan based on the recouped amounts that we could be reasonably certain that we could have by the end of the year, December. And so for those that are expected to be recouped, that would primarily go to our GHLI program. That's the largest obligation that we have, utilities. And then we also included the budget commitments in the revised budget. We reduced personnel by 5 million so that we could accommodate the PSS requests.
Okay.
And again, that would be an obligation with the remaining funds.
Okay. How much would you say currently? I know it's probably a moving number, right? But how much would you say you've identified as recoupments of these ARPA funds?
I know that we have about in our presentation that we provided to the House and then also to the special committee, we have about 60 million that we are hoping that we can recoup. However, I think a third of that is reasonably going to be recouped within the time frame that we need to obligate the funds. So I can't give you an exact number right now, but we are trying to finalize the amount.
Okay. And my understanding is that you guys are still reconciling the accounts. Okay. Um, so for the medical referral program or the health network program, how would that be funded for FY25?
I'm sorry, was that for medical
The medical
referral?
referral program or the health network program, how would that be funded in FY25?
Could I defer that question to OMB for the medical referral program?
Oh, that's okay. Sure. For FY25, what would be the funding source, or how are we going to fund the medical referral program? How much? Good morning.
Allocation for the health network program, there's a $800,000 allocated under the general fund.
Okay. What is our average annual expenditure for medical referral?
We don't have that information. It was provided in the CHCC budget
Okay.
submission, so it should be part of budget package. I believe it's for the enterprise funds. I think it's budget package 3 or 4
Okay.
that we submitted.
Okay. And what about for utilities? So in a lot, a lot of the budget submissions, I noticed that each department was zero funded, right? And the understanding is that the central government will take care of the utilities. I think how much was allocated for utilities for the cinema? $1.8 million.
The secretary here mentions it's 1.8, but overall, I believe for the utilities for all branches of government, it's 2.780 total
For the entire fiscal year?
for FY 2025. And then we anticipate also that any recoupment of funds would be able to support allocation to utilities.
In addition, the revolving funds that the agencies have access to, like this current budget, they're allowed to use their revolving funds for utilities. So they exhaust the funds that they have available first. Then we have the general
Okay.
fund available for that.
Okay.
So we're trying to use all the sources. Yeah.
Okay. And under utilities, still, what is the current annual expenditure for utilities? How much is the government spending on an annual basis?
I know on a monthly, it ranges between 400 to 600,000, and that's for all government accounts. I'm thinking because we have an ongoing reconciliation
Yes.
with CUC, and the total billing that they send us, which includes both local and federal accounts, is around 400 to 600,000 a month.
And speaking of the reconciliation between the government and CUC, where are we with the reconciliations? I know that there was an agreement between CUC and the government that they reconcile the top 15 accounts every. There was a timeline that the acting director at the time gave it to us. Where are we with that reconciliation? And is the government up to par with their payment as agreed upon?
Yes, we are. And so the reconciliation was the top 15, and then after that, it would be the next 15. And then I think we're on our third phase where the remaining accounts are not as significant as the top 30. So we're just lumping them all together. We have monthly meetings with DOJ on the status of the reconciliation. So every time a reconciliation is done, our agreement is to pay 25% of what we reconciled. It's been a challenge because a lot of it's been disputed. However, we're beyond the dispute period. So it's unfortunate and a loss for the CNMI, even though it's a huge water bill that can't be proven.
Yeah.
But according to CUC, it is what it is because we're past the dispute period. These are arrears since 2021 that should have been disputed in 2021. So even though, for example, the Valley Inn for, I don't know if that's Rhoda or Tinian, but their monthly water bill is like $40,000. And that's something that, is caught during the reconciliation. And we highlight to CUC that this is a problem, that we need someone to come and look at the pipes and whether there's a leak. And
Sure.
they've been helpful in providing assistance, but these are billings from 2 years ago. And so their position is if it wasn't disputed, it's valid in terms of the reconciliation. So it's part of the outstanding and we have to pay 25% of that.
Okay.
So again, it's just catching up with all the outstanding and the arrears and the issues that come with them. We use our current appropriation for government utilities to address the arrears, the 25%. Yeah.
And in that agreement, was there any consideration for CUC to waive the penalty fee so that, because, I would think that a good chunk of the outstanding balances is attributed to penalties and fees, right, or interest. So
right now, we've been only addressing the principal.
But in the agreement, was there ever a conversation or consideration or request from the central government to CEC to waive those interest and penalty fees?
Right now, it's based on the reconciliation itself. They are open to disputes that are valid, that they're willing to entertain. As far as the 25% that they're requiring us to pay, it's based on just the principal.
The principal, okay, okay. Thank you for all the efforts that you guys have been making. And is this something that the executive branch is now not really, I mean, I would like for it to be a requirement of all the department heads to really review their utility bills on a monthly basis and just assess whether or not it's valid, it's accurate, because this would take care of a lot of the issues, right? That CUC is saying that if it hasn't been disputed and it's considered valid, and I can see where they're coming from. So we also need to put some accountability and responsibilities on our department heads and not just hand the bill over to finance to pay for the bill. Like they really need to take some time and review to make sure that, the billing is valid and accurate. So
yes, that's a part of one of the governor's initiatives.
Okay.
We did ask all departments and agencies to transition to prepaid if possible.
Okay.
So there has been that transition. So we've seen, a decrease in the cost because they're now on prepaid. And then it's also brought up biweekly in our cabinet meetings, reminders for them to review, enter invoices on
Okay.
time. It's a lot of coordination, but I think we're getting better. There's progress. There's less disconnections because now agencies are more engaged with their billing. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that progress. And then, so I know that the 25% for the retirees' pension benefits is not a legal obligation, but the government has been paying, every year, and that equates to about $14 million annually. What would be the funding source for this, or for FY25? And actually, the loan that we took out from, or the government took out from CDA for the 5-point-something million actually expires in August. So what does the government plan to pay the remainder months of the 25% for September? And where's the funding source going to come from? And then where's the funding source going to come from for FY25?
As far as the 25% pension for this year, like you mentioned, is only funded up to August 31st pay period. We would need additional appropriation for that to continue beyond the fiscal year. For the current fiscal year, we would utilize the governor's 100% reprogramming if available. So again, it depends at that time if we do have. I know it's something that we're tracking closely. In the budget, it is only funded at $1 right now, and again, that's with anticipation of possible other outside sources if identified by the legislature.
Okay. Okay. Mm. I know I should have started my question with this, but we kind of just were all over the place. But since you're here, can you tell us what the state of the CNMI's finances as of today?
I would say we're in slow recovery. It's still a challenge. We still monitor our cash. We monitor the ability to make payroll, make sure that all our obligations are paid timely, especially our settlement fund payments, our debt service payments. And so it still is a challenge. We still have our forecast to collect. And so as far as the coordination within the Department of Finance and the reconciliation and the engagement with the agencies and them being able to use their revolving funds as allowed by the current budget, that has helped relieve the pressure on the general fund because these agencies can now use their other sources for their operations. However, the current state, we are in slow recovery right now. So still a challenge.
Sure. So with Hanmi's reporting on a monthly basis being below what their, fund the levels of revenues that they need to be sustaining their operation. I think right now it's at 40-something%. That obviously tells us the state of the economy, right? And so if they're suffering, everybody else is suffering, including the really small businesses. And most of them are on the verge of shutting down, which greatly affects the collections, right, for BGR. How are the numbers looking for third quarter, both on the revenue?
For
third quarter. So I know that
for third quarter.
Third quarter, you guys are probably already preparing that, right? How are the numbers looking? I mean, I know that first 2 quarters we are in a deficit of a little bit over 4 million?
Yeah. So we're finalizing the numbers for third quarter. I believe we should be submitting it by tomorrow. It's following the same trend as second quarter. We're not seeing too much over, collections like the HOT. We are still seeing some challenges in the excise tax for imports, which again is a indication of the small businesses and their ability to import goods. So I know that the deficit is not as significant as we were feared it to be in the early part of the quarter. So for me, we still have the remaining of fourth quarter to continue our collections, and we're close. So it's just a matter of just tracking it and making sure that the other agencies also are pushing for revenue generation.
Okay. And so with regards to revenues versus expenditures, is the expenditure side on track with what we budgeted, or are we exceeding what we've on the expenditure side?
I believe we're within the budget. Because certain policies have been in place. For example, the 25% that has ceased in the general fund, so that allows any of the lapses within the branches to offset any of the over expenditures that we might be incurring.
Okay. So help me understand. So essentially, we're not really we don't include the 25% in the budget, right, as an expenditure, and we. Finance or the governor's office has identified what the revenues are going to be for the fiscal year. So where are we finding these additional sources of funds to pay for the 25% if they weren't captured in the budget?
We have utilized the governor's 100% reprogramming, so any lapses that were available will be reprogrammed to the 25% account. Right now,
Okay.
that's funded at $1. And so that was the reason why we escalated the issue, was because there's pressure on the general fund to meet that obligation
Mhm.
on a per pay period basis, especially when we can only utilize budget reprogramming.
So let me ask this question. So for the funds that are being reprogrammed, right? Are they? Can the government use those reprogramming funds to pay for an obligation that's not really in the budget?
For an obligation that's not.
Does that make sense? So the
Can you
25%.
can you provide an example?
So the 25% is not listed as an expense on the budget, but yet we use revenues or funds from revenues that we identified on the budget to pay for a non-legal obligated expense.
The $1 authorizes the governor to expense. So with his 100% reprogramming authority, if it's reprogrammed into that specific org, then that allows the governor to expense it. Like for example, let's take it outside the 25%. If it's a project or something that is not in the budget, then the
Mhm.
governor would not be authorized to expend it because it's not part of the general fund appropriations when it was enacted into law.
Right, and I think that's where I'm going with that, right? So the 25% is not showing on the budget as an approved, but when we approve the budget, it's not showing as an expense item on the budget, but yet we find money to pay for it, which is outside of what's approved.
There is $1 under personnel under the Public Law 23-09. There is. So the governor can, as long as he does not go over the total appropriation level, which is, for example, in FY in the current year, there's 114
Mhm.
million for or whatever appropriated for expenditures in both personnel and in all others. So as long as the governor doesn't go over the 114, he has that authority, that 100% reprogramming authority, where he can shift funds from the authorized executive branch into the 25%, because there is $1. When it's zero, then we cannot reprogram any funds into that app org.
Okay. I still don't understand, but we'll have that. Okay. So because we are really tight on our finances, are there any outstanding balances due to our vendors out there?
Yes, we still have our outstanding COVID expenditures that we've been working closely with the Public Assistance Office to review. We have about 5.3 million in expenditures, and our approach to paying those unbudgeted expenditures for COVID is to have the public assistance do direct to vendor payments for those that are allowable. So if it's pending in the disaster account, it's being reviewed by Homeland Security. And if it's allowable under the public assistance program, then it's sent off to FEMA for their approval. And once that is awarded to the CNMI, then we cut a check directly to the vendor for those pending payments.
Okay, so we're not using the general funds right now
Not
to
at the
pay for
moment.
those vendors that were okay. Before I forget, I know that you had mentioned earlier in your presentation that you had your first drawdown for the Garrett
MPL.
Revival. How much was that?
First drawdown for
Yeah.
MPLT?
Yeah.
Yes. So it was around 500,000. That
For the
OPD
Garrett
for
revitalization. Okay.
Garrett revitalization.
And when was that? When did the drawdown occur?
I know it was within the past 30 days. I can't remember exactly when. It might have been the beginning of July or end of June. was when we drew from MPLT, paid the vendors, and then submitted our reimbursement to EDA.
Mhm.
And then we did receive the reimbursement back from EDA, I think around the second week of July. And then we repaid MPLT. And so
Okay,
that's
so we're
the
current.
revolving-
We're
yes.
back to, okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Um, okay. That's all I have for now, Chair. Will you? Thank you.
Senator Carl. All right, I'll just close out quickly with the remaining divisions for finance or financial services. I know, again, I'm going to bring back the 6 personnel that you have under the federal accounts. How quickly do we get, from my understanding, or at least from experience and hearing out, once an invoice is submitted for drawdown, it takes weeks. Is that because of the shortage of staff, or is it the process?
Come again?
Like the federal drawdown, once you submit an invoice for payment or request for drawdown, is it the process from the feds that's taking too long to pay out vendors, or is it the shortage of manpower in entering these invoices for drawdown?
Sometimes it's the depends on what kind, because there's some grantors that would just take the 24 hours. Some of the grantors will take the 48 hours. And also with the shortage of staff, sometimes we, takes 2 to 3 days finalizing reports, approving the supervisors approving the reports and submitting it to Treasury for drawdowns.
But when we're seeing invoices being paid a month later, is that a staffing concern, or is that just part of the drawdown
No,
process?
usually doesn't take a month. I'm not sure what grant is that, but if we draw the money within the next 48 hours, we should get the money and the bills should be paid.
Okay, because I've heard from like Treasury stating that, oh, we're waiting on federal drawdown, and federal drawdown takes
Yeah, it
3
all
weeks.
depends, because one of our grants is we can only collect within the quarter, like once a quarter, like boarding safety, I think. We can only collect every quarter.
Right.
So once only, but the
That's
rest
but
we
that's
can.
one. Yeah, they're. I mean, you're dealing with millions of dollars in grants, right? And the quicker we can get them out, the quicker we can get IDCs on those, or the quicker we can expend those funds. So my concern is it's taking weeks.
Let me answer that and how we've addressed that issue that has been a concern that has been brought up to my attention. And so we've recently transitioned some grants to the revenue allocation module, and that is to relieve the workload off of the federal section at financial services. And so what that transition did was allow the agencies to prepare their drawdown requests. That includes their expenditure reports, filling out the SF-270, having it all prepared, which is what federal section was doing for all grants. But we have capacity within the federal programs themselves. They have accountants and program coordinators that can do this job, submit it to Treasury, and then Treasury will submit it to the Treasury portal and have the drawdowns come in quicker. So since we've made that transition, we found that the drawdowns are now being processed within a week of the invoices being processed, depending on the timing, right, for
Okay.
those agencies. Now I think we've transitioned at least 50% of the programs, and then the others that needed more help or more time to set them up correctly within the module has been done. And so now we're training the remaining programs that have not yet used that feature that Munis has. And so in the past, when we were having that problem, we were not using it. We were doing a manual process that's like 3 times longer. So I could understand the workload of the federal section doing everything manually for all programs, but now there has already been a transition to use this more efficient process. I hear you saying that some maybe vendors are following up with Treasury and they're saying we're waiting for the drawdown. there are multiple situations where maybe the invoice was entered last week, the drawdown was submitted, we're just waiting for the deposit. In other instances, like I just mentioned, COVID payments, we're working with FEMA. That takes 60 to 90 days of their review. And so when Treasury might say we're waiting on the drawdown for this COVID expense, it means it's in the process, the long process of the drawdown. And so there are many grants, there are many timelines, there are many moving targets for these things. So we just have to understand what grant are they following up on, what's the type of expense. If it's let's say, a construction expense, it has to be approved by DPW, OPD before it even gets entered into the system. So if the vendor submits their invoice to OPD, it takes DPW to approve it, then OPD to approve it, their grantor to approve it, then it gets entered, then it gets drawn. So there's many different vendors, many different timelines and expectations, but I know that we're moving in the right direction by allowing the agencies to start at least drawing those that are simple, those for office supplies, equipment, things that can be submitted as an invoice and drawn within the same week. So we're making that transition.
So it's not so much a capacity concern at this point then?
It used to be, yeah.
Well, I mean,
Not so much now.
Because that will bring me to my point where the Senate passed amended the House bill with the IDC, right? And so if the House moves on it, or if we maybe propose to include it as a provision in the budget to provide the 25% IDC to Department of Finance to spread across all divisions, that could support some of the divisions, but then we can also probably increase capacity on the local side because you're going to shift some of that positions into that IDC, whatever you plan to use for the IDC. So my request today with maybe Ms. Bernie and you, Secretary, is if we were to include what was proposed in this House bill to provide for the 25% for Department of Finance, how many of those FTEs can you transition over to IDC, and then how many would that open up to use the local budget to hire more staff to fill in the I guess whatever needs you have for the different divisions, whether to transition some of them more to rev and tax, or hire additional staff for travel, because I know travel while they're working so hard, it takes a long time, you seem swamped. But so what would that be? What would the 25% of next fiscal year's IDC would be? And how can you utilize some of that to cover for some of your personnel expenses while maybe hiring more additional employees?
Because Director Bernie and Financial Services, they handle their workload include both local and federal. We would always need additional staff. Payroll would need additional staff. Travel, AP, federal section, since they're not doing drawdowns, they're still doing fund certifications, new grant creations.
Right. So whatever the
contract,
25% would cover, if that's something you would like to add as an additional proposal or additional FTE that would be covered by that 25%, then we can include that. Maybe zero funded for now, and then use if the provision goes through on both houses, and that'll take care of those additional FTEs that you'll need. Thank you, Ms. Bernie. That's all I have for financial services. My next question is revolving accounts. How close are you to what's the term that you use? Transfer these balances from JDE to, because we're gonna. I guess the proposal is to maintain the suspension of the limitations on earmarks, but the reports that we're getting it seems inaccurate. For instance, Customs Seaport has 4 million in there. I don't know if that's still the case, or was that ever the case, but where are we in transferring these balances over and having an accurate amount so that we understand how much these divisions actually have in revolving accounts that they can use for operations?
The way that we prioritize the list of revolving funds is based on the actual need, because there are maybe 500 accounts that need to be certified. And we started off with those that the departments are aware of and they're actively using. So we are servicing all the departments. So they come in with their revolving funds that they're using now. We certify those. We only have 2 people working on that in addition to their daily duties. So it involves my office and financial services. So we have a check and balance on the process of identifying their true ending balances and JDE, bringing that over. And then there's a triple check that happens because of the initial implementation issues. So as far as how far we've gone, I would say we're probably only 50-60% because it's based on need. The same 2 people are also the ones that establish accounts for new local delegation funds. And so the workload is a lot because they also have to do those fund or account creations and work with OMB to post their budget. So we are working as fast as we can, but we also depend on the agencies to bring forth the ones that they urgently need because they know they have funds available that they could use. So then we prioritize those. There's also some that are dormant that don't necessarily need to be transferred over right away because it's not being used, or maybe there's no funds in those accounts and should be closed. So right now, that's what it is. We're just trying to manage.
But then there's also the concern where an agency says, "Oh, my munis is showing 0, but I remember from JDE we had a huge amount." And so how
So
are
they
they
come
able to
forward.
utilize?
They come forward with that and they make their request to certify certain accounts. Sometimes the request will come from, let's just say, this body or Senate president or any member to ask us to certify. And so we make that a priority to certify those lists that you provide to us, meaning it will be done for the department. They don't have to request it again. It's already going to be certified because somebody else asked to certify it for another need, maybe for legislation or something.
So it's a matter of agencies coming to you requesting, and so
If we don't get to it first,
right,
another
and so
way.
you'll transfer that funds over
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we would appreciate once. I mean, there's over 100 revolving accounts that we receive from your office, and so if we can get any updates as they come, as they're made available, so that we can keep track of which agency has money. I mean, like, again, what's the purpose of this 4 million that's sitting in custom seaport that was probably never used, or could we reappropriate some of that money to help cover for other expenses? And so any updated balance on those kind of accounts, like the ones with the larger balances, is something that could assist us in determining whether we can move some of those monies around. If we continue to suspend the limitations on these revolving accounts, does the 100% apply? Does the governor's 100% apply towards those accounts, based on your understanding? And if that's something that we would need to clarify, maybe
I
moving
may stand
forward.
corrected, but I believe it's not.
Okay.
The governor's reprogramming is only within the executive branch.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, is executive branch revolving accounts? I mean, is that
No.
okay? Just to clarify, some agencies were concerned that if we did that, then those monies might not be there. Okay. My last question is to procurement. Mr. Nicholas, does your office maintain a year-end inventory report? And if so, do you do some kind of tracking as to, like, I don't know, maybe percentage of utilization of these capital assets that maybe we can shift around?
So, Chairman, to my knowledge, the CNMI has never had a full government-wide repository of inventory reconciliation. We are close. I would say about 85% of the way there. I do have 3 individuals who for a number of years have been supported through a technical assistance grant through OIA to support the effort. I believe the grant is coming to an end. And I do have an ask of the secretary and this body if we could be able to keep them on for purposes of ensuring we do complete this first ever government-wide inventory reconciliation, so we can have a good understanding and a good idea of how much our government truly costs. For I guess the way I like to describe it is, we've seen funds since the 70s till present day going upwards in terms of the CNMI receiving money for whether federal, local, combined. But our personnel at procurement who manage and maintain some of these assets have remained somewhat below some of the requirements. Like I mentioned, one person having to review and monitor 500 plus open contracts for the government, in addition to other responsibilities. It's a big task, but we do have it. We are very close. We are looking to close out for FY22 on the single audit, which would include a good idea of where we are, asset-wise, inventory-wise, and then from there, we do have plans to also finalize and complete the FY23 for the 23 audit by December of this year as well.
Well, I just bring that up because, once we have an idea of what assets we have, maybe we can shift some of that around, because a lot of the requests that we're getting also from, like what we've heard on Rhoda is we need riding mowers, we need bush cutters, but if one agency is not utilizing it to its, or, close to at 100% or even 50, we can maybe share some of the resources and not have to keep procuring new equipment. And so that's
Yes.
hopefully something that we can revisit.
Okay.
Are there any concerns or even plans to revert back to the old procurement process in terms of maybe lowering the threshold back to what it was? Or are we going to, is it still needed to maintain that? I don't know, what is it, 50, I think, 50,000 or 250?
In the most recent iteration of the procurement regulations, there was a lot of information that was replicated from what the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR, which is the federal government's document that tells them how to manage and spend their money. We have looked at it currently, and there are some areas that we would like to be able to discuss, potentially drawing down on thresholds being one of them. Also discussing some more on contracts administration, being able to work a little bit more with DPW and ensuring that capacity-wise, when it comes to construction contracts, things like that, we do have the necessary training tools and resources available so that the people administering on behalf of various entities are also familiar with how they can go about managing through the regs.
Okay, so what's the threshold right now?
For a single acquisition, sir, is 10,000.
Okay, and then
3 vendors, depending again on whether you're going local or federal. The local is up to 50,000. The federal is up to 250,000, and then anything above 50,000, which we consider most of the time specialized procurement, which is covered under Part 300 of our regulations. This includes A&E, construction, office equipment rentals, or office rental space. Those usually go through ITB or RFP.
okay. So right now the 10,000 and the 50,000 it works well. I mean, in the sense that we are still trying to get the cheapest but quality.
I think it's given it's afforded a lot of latitude to our expenditure authorities, the various government entities. I believe that number of the expenses as well at 10,000 is a little bit high, given I know we do have other considering factors, transportation costs and whatnot. But a number of the expenses that we have been observing with the various government entities do fall within that range of the 10,000. And at least on my end as the acting director, it's my position that I would believe it'd be best used if we could lower the threshold to allow for more competition to be able to be.
Yeah, because that
growing
worked
within
at
the
a time where
community.
we had ARPA funds and CARES fund, all of
Yeah.
that stuff. But now when we are in the, trying to be frugal, and I think maybe that should be considered. If not through regulation, then of course we're going to have to do it through statute. But because you have that flexibility to
Yes.
change the regulations, we hope that that's something that.
It has been a discussion point, Chairman, and yes, we are looking into that and other matters as well.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank
you, Acting Director. Any last minute remarks? Recognize Vice Chair.
Just sharing what some of the concerns that were raised during our hearing in Rhoda, and not specific to procurement, but maybe this is more for the secretary or IT. The DFAMs in Rhoda had shared with us that they had been experiencing delay in processing payments for their ambulatory services. They're not sure why it's taking so long. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that, Secretary, but I just thought I'd share that with you. Maybe you can task someone to look into that. And then also, we heard some concerns about training for Munis, and this is Rhoda. Apparently, some the trainings that they have here on Saipan is not necessarily being offered to the municipality of Rhoda, and many times they would have to attend the training via their phone, um, because they don't even. I guess the concern that they brought up is that they're not even familiar with the system itself. So to hear the training over the phone or just on their screen and not being able to be here in person is very difficult and challenging. And so, I would like to, I'm sharing that concern with you so that in the future, if you could please include the other municipalities as they're experiencing really difficulty in even just understanding how the Muni system works. So, and then that kind of brings me to my next point is that they were sharing with us that there are times when what they see on their side in the system is different from what's showing here in the central office. So there are many times they are unable to upload invoices for payments because on their end it's showing a negative. But when they call Saipan or the central office, they're being told that you have more than sufficient funds in your system. So is there a reason why there's that disconnect or discrepancy in? Or what? Because one of them would show a negative balance on their end, where Saipan would show something different.
It could be with just training, proper entry of the invoice, but I'll defer to Raya to
Okay.
maybe assume some of the causes or reasons for trouble entering an invoice.
Yeah, there could be multiple reasons. As Secretary had mentioned, there could be one, it kind of depends on what their role is, how it's defined. And so then we go back to data user roles and permissions. So if they were able to enter an invoice, they would only be able to invoice against certain group of accounts versus somebody else that may try to do it. And then they're able to access more accounts. It could be the parameters of what's on hold. So they may have entered requisitions beforehand, and they're still sitting there putting a hold on their budget, and that's what's showing up on there. So it's encumbered.
So is that something that is communicated to the respective users there? Or so when they call and inquire on the challenges that they have, right? Is that something that OIT takes it further and actually looks at the system to see what's causing the discrepancy and then help? I mean, like you
Well-
said earlier, maybe they don't have access to, they only have access to certain rights on the system, right? So is that something that OIT looks beyond what's on the surface and say, hey, we realize that you only have access to this, but since I don't know,
I mean, we and that was very big, especially when I first joined the government again, round two. And so we make every effort to train everybody, and of course, people come and people go. And so when there's always a new employee, the secretary's office is always ready on hand to help and troubleshoot what could be the
Sure.
cause of the issue. And so we walk through them we walk them through it to really try to identify. So if you hear of any other issues, please direct them to the secretary's
Sure.
office, and we can see whether it's a OIT issue. We can see whether it's going to be a financial services or a procurement issue.
So is there an SOP or desk procedures that has been created and provided to these different municipalities so that they can try and troubleshoot the system themselves before they try, attempting trying to get assistance from Central?
There is a tool with Tyler Technologies, and we can provide that to sort of see how to do a fund status report. Of course, the way we set up our system is a little bit different, so we'd have to, in a way, customize it or tailor it to how to read our financials.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, that would greatly help them if they can help themselves, right? That would
Yeah.
alleviate a lot of the calls and tickets that you guys receive for stuff that they could have probably done it themselves. So if we can afford them those materials, that would be great. And speaking of Munis, since you're here, how many modules in the purchase price that we paid for the Munis system? How many modules did it come with?
um,
I don't think
Kendra.
we can't recall right now the total number of modules, only that we bought the entire suite.
Which is how much again?
We were looking at like
Thir-
over $1 million in annual licenses.
Right, but the
Um,
software itself, how much did it cost the CNMI to purchase Munis?
the total project cost, including the professional services to install. I don't have the number on me or at the top of my head. I do know that we provided figures of how much it cost basically from the start of the contract to current. And I can send that email again.
Okay, that'd be great.
But I do know that we've been working diligently to reduce the number of modules to those that are really essential right now to our operations, given the state of the.
So how many modules would you say is currently active?
I think
that
the
it's being
modules that
used?
we decided to keep is before it was over $1 million if we had kept the whole suite for resubscription, but we brought it down to closer to 350 to 400,000.
Is it because the other modules are not being used?
And the
But-
number of licenses.
And the number of licenses, okay. So how many modules are currently being used?
I would say there's about maybe 10 to
10 modules?
because you have to count it separately. Like there's a payroll module
Yes,
and the
that's
federal
kind of where I'm
module,
going.
yeah. So,
So
there's
how-
multiple. And the numbers that we're keeping in mind is the total cost of the critical modules, because there's a lot of different components to a module.
Sure.
So it's more of the cost that we're looking at. But again, Ryan, we have the listing.
Okay.
Because we have to communicate with Tyler what we intend to keep and what
Right.
we intend to discontinue.
Sure.
So
And
we
I'm
do
just
have that
asking
list.
because pretty much like each module is connected into the other module, right? In order to generate reports, they are all integrated one way or another. And in order for the reports to be generated and reflect, actual data, right? All these modules have to be speaking to each other and active. So I guess my question is, what did you guys consider critical?
Yeah, we have the list. of
Okay.
the-
We can
And
send that
is
to-
Munis being used right now to generate financial reports?
Yes.
Fund
I'm sure.
status reports and stuff
Fund
like that.
status reports. And so we'd like to make some other changes. So there's reporting that we've gotten. In the procurement side, we have contract management, inventory, fixed asset management, requisition, and
Those are all
invoicing.
separate modules.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then in treasury, we have general revenues, payments manager.
Mhm.
There's a
That's
lot.
all I use. No?
So pretty much all
Accounts
accounting
receivable.
functions, right?
Right, yeah.
Are considered critical to
Yeah.
Munis.
We do have data reporting. We've decided to keep some other, or it's almost, it has to be included in there. Especially the analytics and reporting. Of course, we'd also like to keep some of that going and we want to expand on that, so that way you guys have access to it as well, or stakeholders in general have access to the information on an as needed basis. Now, of course, we're not ready to launch that yet until we actually have reliable quality data.
Is
to
the
report out.
bank reconciliation a part of that module, or is that completely
Financials.
separate?
That's a separate module, or a part of the financial suite. Yeah.
Right. And I'm asking because I think it's financial services that does the reconciliation of bank statement, right? And so are they using Munis to reconcile the accounts, or are they using a completely different software?
They're using the Munis bank reconciliation modules to reconcile the bank statements to our books.
And okay. And
yeah.
where are we with the reconciliations of bank statements? Are we behind on our
We're behind. They're
How-
in 2023 right now.
2023?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're catching up.
Catching up.
They have some other consultants, professional services that are assisting them But yeah, they are catching up.
Okay. And then, so I think from what I understand, when the JD Edwards was transitioned over to Munis, only the ending balances were migrated into Munis, correct?
It was also some balances just to create. So there was active accounts, and that's what was decided to migrate over. And they brought over balances just to balance it out. So we've identified some entries that were incorrect, and even within in their placement. So you'll see like a peculiar or strange entry in an asset account with a wrong balance. And so it was just more of, again, at the time of the implementation, I don't think that the implementation team had the proper support
Okay.
or guidance during that time.
Would you say that the the migration, I mean, I would, for cash disbursement purposes, were how much of that was migrated over into Munis? Okay,
Sorry,
cash receipts and cash disbursements. Was it just the ending balances, or were actual transactions migrated over?
The balances were brought over, and I think Treasury also had to update some of the balances themselves to get it right. But it's still, what is it? Because, and you're hitting a good point there, is because the reconciliation hasn't really been completed,
Mhm.
it's also affecting, in a way, the balance in the cash
Yes.
side of things. So that's one of the issues that we ran into. And hope we're getting there.
Okay.
Once we complete the audit for 21, we can get our good beginning 22 as our sort of source of truth.
So, and I know part of the migration is one of the reasons why, there's been some challenges with the reconciliation, but just on the overall process of bank reconciliations, is there a reason why we're behind on our bank reconciliations? I mean, I understand we have, many accounts to reconcile, but
Yeah, it also has to do with the file that we receive from the bank, which is what's needed. So it's a file of all the bank transactions showing up on the statement, and we have to upload that into the system. And there was a whole period of time where nothing was being imported into the system.
I
So
see.
the system doesn't have anything to reconcile. But I think April 2023 and moving forward, we started doing it daily. We downloaded ourselves and uploaded into the system so we could start having some data in the recon module. And we've been working with Bank of Guam to build the historical file. If it was done on day one and downloaded and uploaded since we went live, it would be in the system, but it's not. And so they've been working on that. And in the absence of that file, Recon had to do it manually on Excel.
Yes.
So we're trying to use the system, right, to be more efficient. And so moving forward, yes, they can import it daily. It's really the catch up that's
Thank
been
you.
difficult.
Thank you, Secretary, for your, for your efforts and in being proactive and trying to reconcile those accounts on a daily basis. I can only imagine that there are thousands and thousands of transactions that occur within a period of 1 month, right? So, trying to reconcile that on a daily basis really helps you guys at the end of the month when it's time to fully reconcile the books. So, that's all I have, Chair. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Vice. Sorry, I know I said last, but since I see Velma, we don't. I don't see any allocation for GHLI, but I understand that you are in the process of, or there's an RP out. Is there a threshold that you set as to how much you won't go over as far as what you're expecting of these insurance companies? If that makes any sense.
We don't currently have a threshold. We've kind of left this RFP open, unlike the previous RFP, to see what the proposers can come with and what kind of pricing they will offer the CNMI. And then depending on the proposals proposals that we receive, of course, we'll try and negotiate the better deal for the CNMI when we receive those proposals.
Okay, but seeing as how it wasn't budgeted, or it's not, there's no allocations for that expense, what's the intention?
Like right now, it's being funded with ARPA recoup funds. And so that is our priority in terms of obligating the remaining funds that we could recoup. The priority would go to GHLI. And so that's why we did the announcement early, is so that we could get the bids in and determine what would be the best provider for the health insurance, especially. And then from there, obligate it before the end of the year. So it's just a matter of time before we receive the bids. We have our evaluation team, and that would be our priority.
Okay, as long as, I mean, it's not like we're, the legislature will be given this last minute request to do some sort of appropriation to meet that. So this will be addressed by ARPA funds that
Yes.
are being recouped. Okay, that's all I had. With that, thank you, Secretary, to you and your team for weathering the storm, being that it is cold in here too. As far as a separate meeting with you and the SA for OMB, if you can get back to me anytime in the week of the 19th, if you can see what your schedule's like and let us know which day works best, and we'll try to squeeze in maybe a last meeting before we work on finalizing the budget. With that, again, thank you to everyone that came in today and for your patience, and we thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing these past couple of months. With that, members, we move on to the next item on the agenda. We do have the Department of Public Safety and DFEMS on Thursday, starting at 9 a.m. Any other announcements? If not, can I get a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion was made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Meeting is hereby adjourned at 12:42 p.m.